Come on. All right. Okay. Sorry about this. Just setting up. And greetings from Tokyo. We will begin momentarily with the live stream discussion of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country from 1991. So it is almost time. Well, it is time now, but let's just wait another couple minutes. And so let me just get ready here. There we go. Okay, sorry about this. I am also getting ready here. And I hope the sound is okay. Is the sound okay? Great. Oh, great. Thank you very much. Oh, great. Look, let's see the chat here. Wonderful. Cooper Glover is here. Hello. Seth Walsh. Kirk. Oh, yes. Yes. We will get to that trial scene. Yes. Floydian Pink is here. Hello. Thank you so much. The game's afoot. Or I should say, the game's afoot, huh? I warn you in advance, I'm gonna be terrible at my Christopher Plummer impersonation, but I have no choice because we cannot do this without having at least one or two Christopher Plummer impersonations here. So, okay. So the next thing. Oh, Floyd and Pink is here. Hello. And let's see. Seth Walsh, Chancellor Gorkon was so close to making it to that 1991 Vanilla Ice concert. Yes, this is I understand, a reference to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, Secret of the Ooze, if I'm not mistaken. Well done. Neo Blissy is here. Hello, it's nice to see you. Hope you're feeling better this week. Thank you very much. I am. Thank you. Let's see, Christian's Hobby Blog is here. Hello, it's nice to see you. I just finished it, and unfortunately, I think it is my least favorite of the series. My impression is that the cast did not want to do this one. Okay, not a problem at all, my friend. Neo Blissy says, another thing, will there be live streams on the Next Generation films or the Kelvin films? I'll talk about that. I'll discuss what my plans are, and the like. I probably will just stop at this point for now, but if there's the opportunity to do so in the future, we'll see. I'll maybe explain it at the tail end, and just let you know what my immediate plans are when we finish. But Don Kelly is here. Hello. Let's see, just scrolling. Mike Eli is here. It's nice to see you as always. Analysis of Sci-Fi, it's nice to see you as always. W Forge, it's nice to see you as always, my friend. Thank you so much, my friends. Friends, Romans, lend me your ears. Roger's here, hello. Great. And Zyrother's here. Hello. Perhaps Daisuke can read to us Hamlet in the original Klingon. My goodness. I used to have the Act 3 Scene 1 soliloquy memorized when I was a high school student, but now I can't remember it for the life of me. Although there is a that was from my high school English class. But what is it? But the key phrase, at least, well, there are many key phrases in Hamlet, and was it, who would Farrell's bear? To Gretton's went under was under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will. So this is it is kind of relevant to, well, it is relevant in the fact it's in the title, but we'll talk about what the undiscovered country is interpreted to mean in the context of Shakespeare versus how we see it being used by the characters here in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Countries. It's an interesting twist, I think, on the concept of the undiscovered country, which we understand too could have been, but ended up not being, of course. It could have been the title for the second Star Trek film, but we will wait. Yes, yes. We'll wait for that a little bit later. Island 007100 is here. Yes, thank you. Henry and Trooper Film Productions is here. Hello, thank you. Jared is here. Hello, thank you. It's great. Dan is here. Hello, thank you very much. Galaxy Quest. Yes. Okay, so and Scott is here. Hello, Scott. It's nice to see you. Okay, so let us then begin very quickly with the preliminary matters as we always do. So thank you very much. Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friend. Thank you very much for joining us once again for a live stream discussion. And thank you for all the well wishes. Yes, I feel in much better spirits now. And things are well, or maybe not 100% well, but things are as well as they can be. So thank you very much to all who expressed your kind wishes. So thank you so much for that. Truly, thank you. It makes me want to come back to YouTube again and again and again. With opportunities like this today, the live stream discussion. So, Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, is the topic of today's discussion. This is 1991, yes, and it is directed by Nicholas Meyer, and it has the cast and crew, the USS Enterprise, still helmed or captained by Captain James Kirk, James T. Kirk, and it'll be interesting to see where that T plays in, of course, later in the film, in the context of Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. And other things. So before we begin in earnest, let us just always say that, of course, this is a discussion that is not meant to be any kind of overview or thorough review of this work or any kind of academic discussion. This is meant to be a casual and hopefully fun conversation between and among all of us here, friends, fans of the film, people who have seen the film and the like. So I don't claim to have any handle on the entirety of the background of this film or the Star Trek details. So I will do my best to explain it in the context of what my understanding is. But I just keep that in mind. This is just meant to be a casual, fun conversation, and I hope it is fun. And also, I think we will be talking about spoilers. So if you do not, or if you have not seen the film yet, then I would strongly encourage, of course, with all great respect to you, I would strongly encourage, all the same, just to turn off the live stream, and then you can watch the film in your own good time, and then you can come back at any time. This should be uploaded as a video after the fact. So if you are interested in that, please, we will be talking about the specific details of this plot of this film. So just in case you haven't seen it, please keep that in mind. This will always be here as a video, barring any unforeseen circumstance, of course, but this will always be uploaded as a video after the fact. So you can always come back anytime, my friends, and we can talk about this film, you and I, Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. And also the live chat is open for everyone. As you have always done in the past, you've taken care of listening to people, and I've seen in the past maybe people have one view of a film and then other people have other views of a film, but there have never been, to my knowledge anyway, any type of unpleasant clashes or anything like that. It's been very pleasant. It's been a really lovely conversation, and that is due all to you, my dear friends. You have always given me and everyone else here room for a type of discussion and to let people say what it is they want to say about a particular film, and and the Star Trek films, of course, being examples. And you've always treated everyone with a sense of respect. And so thank you so much, as always, for doing that. I wouldn't be able to do this channel or these live streams without you. And so I always have relied upon you before. And of course, today I will be relying upon you as well. And you are always there for me and for all of us. And I just want to thank you very much in advance for always looking out for me. As I say, I don't deserve I don't deserve your kindness and attention. Let me say that I'm very, very appreciative, truly appreciative of it. So thank you very much for looking out for me in this channel, and let us go forth in the live chat in that same spirit. Also, I will say that I will do my best to address everyone, or as many people as I can, in the chat. But if I skip over your name or your comment, I apologize profusely, very much so. It is not my willful intent to purposefully skip over anyone. But I will try to catch everything as I can. And I will, of course, be focusing in primarily on Star Trek related, excuse me, let me just change that. There we go. I will be focusing in on Star Trek related comments. So if you have a comment that is not Star Trek related, you can just leave me a comment under a video, and I will be very happy to try to address it to the best of my ability at that time. So I will. If I do skip over your non-Star Trek related comment here, again, please, I hope you are not offended. It's not my intent at all to cause any offense, but just we can, of course, talk about those topics maybe in a separate video, or you can leave me a comment under a separate video, and I'll be doing my very best to reach out to you. Okay, so before we go in any further, let me just go to the live chat, and then we will go from there. So let's see who else is here. Let's see. Okay, Matt Flaird is here. Hello, it's nice to see you. Floyd and Pink, hopefully this comes to 4K soon. Watching the Blu-ray last night made me realize it needs a nice new upgrade. Yes, so I'm always bad when it comes to the details, in fact, but the 4K release has not occurred yet for Star Trek 6. That's my understanding. So if I'm wrong, please correct me. But also the Blu-ray, the current Blu-ray release that are made available is the theatrical version only, right? So if you wanted to get the or what's purported to be the theatrical version, I'll actually talk about that a little bit later, but it's the so-called theatrical version, let's put it that way, on Blu-ray. And then there's this earlier, for example, there were some earlier VHS tapes that had what was called the extended cut, I think, with some extra scenes and extra subplot or two. And also we have the DVD here, which is purported also to be, this is a special collector's edition with the so-called extended cut or director's cut with actually it's slightly different as well. So there are all these little wrinkles when it comes to not very minor change. Well, actually there's one change that's actually not so minor, but we will talk about that. I will do my best to just to touch upon those changes very briefly, but I don't want to focus too much because I know that some people haven't had access to say one cut or the other, but I'll do my best to try to tiptoe around that, but I do appreciate that there are a number of versions, at least two quote-unquote official versions, but we'll talk about my thoughts about that as well, because I did see this in the theater, actually, and so I do have memories of the theater experience. Let's see. Okay, W. Ford says, movies got a lot of great quotes. Yes, yes, indeed. Christian says, I'm getting a pot of black coffee ready. Yes, yes. This is Bones, I think. I don't know whether to congratulate you or not, Bones. I wouldn't. That's great. All right. W4Jess, is this the discussion of the special edition or the theatrical? It doesn't, I'll try to make it neutral in that way, but I will make some brief references to the differences, but I'll try to make it neutral because I know it's not easy for people to watch both versions or one or the other. So maybe focusing in on the theatrical. Let's see. Damien, yes, yes, says yes. I've never trusted Klingons, and I never will. Never been able to forgive them for the death of my boy. Yes, yes. Don't ever say that kind of potentially inflammatory language when you have the door open, because someone could be standing there. Who knows? I don't know, right? Who someone? But anyway, um, so yeah, yeah. All right. So and JA 1969. Hello, you say the best Star Trek film is The Wrath of Khan, hands down. Um, Speaking, and also there's mention here of Cliff Idleman, the great score as well. We will talk about that as well. So, a Vision Line is here. Hello. Oh, Jerome Weaselberry is here. Hello. Let us take a moment to congratulate well everyone here, but and also Jerome Weaselberry, who uploaded a fine video. She always does, but a fine video on Star Trek Five: The Final Frontier. Uh, it's in my it's much better. She said it. Jerome Weaselberry stated the case for Star Trek Five so well and so much better than anything I could ever possibly hope to achieve on a video in my video approach. So she did a stellar job, much better. The in many ways the kind of final word, as it were, on Star Trek Five scholarship. Well done, well done. I was very happy to see that video. All right, so let's see. Um, let's see here. Oh, Rob the Old Mongoose says a bit off topic, but do you know Doctor Who series? I know I wouldn't go off topic, but let me just say yes, I love Doctor Who. I love Doctor Who. Yes, I don't have everything, but yes, I'm a huge fan, and I'm not the biggest Doctor Who expert, but yes. Um, I guess it's pretty it's a kind of standard response now, I suppose, because it is so epic. But right, I've seen Caves of Adrazani is like just one of the most epic examples of television ever, and just its construction. Well, anyway, sorry, I don't want to get off track here. So maybe one of these days we'll speak a little bit more on this channel about Doctor Who. But in the meantime, let's turn our attentions to Star Trek Six: The Undiscovered Country, which, as I alluded to in some past remarks, maybe in other videos, this is a film like other. Not all, but other films in the Star Trek film series up to now. This is a film that I did see in the theater as well upon initial release. I saw it, so it was in 1991, so I was born in 1979, so that would have made me, what, 10, 11, 12 years old or something around that time. And so my mother was also a big movie fan, and so she took me to the theater, and she and I watched the film Star Trek Six: The Undiscovered Country. It was a fairly packed audience, as I recall. Again, my memory can be very failing me lately, but as I recall now, it was a fairly packed audience, and it was a grand, grand time. It was a lovely experience. There was, of course, maybe a sense in the air that this would be the quote-unquote final mission. It had been, in fact, marketed as such at the time. This would be the crew's final mission. This was marketed in the teaser trailer, for instance, is a type of wrap-up of all the adventures of the crew of the USS Enterprise under the command of Kirk. And I'd say that not just Captain Kirk, but of course we also have those adventures that we saw where he was not captain. And so and for one final adventure, that would be one of the phrases that would be used, as I say, in the marketing at the time. So this was hyped up to be the final quote unquote voyage of the Enterprise under this crew. With one exception, of course, because we know as we get into the film, and I didn't know this until the film started, which would be that Sulu would be having his own command. And this was, of course, the return of sorts of the USS Excelsior. So this was that was a big surprise when the film opened to me, when the film opened and the credits rolled, and after the credits and the boom and Praxis, or I guess half of Praxis, or not half, maybe a good portion of Praxis exploded. And so that's and we see the teacup and then Sulu, right, just completing, what is it, the 3-year mission to catalog gaseous planetary anomalies in Beta Quadrant, I think it is. And so this is, please correct me if I'm wrong, if I got those details wrong. I think I got it right. But anyway, so that's an interesting detail too. Let's keep that in mind. So it's the Excelsior that had all the equipment, we assume, to catalog gaseous anomalies. So let's keep that in mind when we get to the final battle of Khitomer and Uhura and her comment on the Enterprise about equipment and carrying equipment regarding cataloging gaseous anomalies. So that's an interesting, maybe. Actually, let me just mention it now. I don't understand that comment. I always thought it was the Excelsior that had the mission of cataloging gaseous anomalies. It wasn't the Enterprise. The Enterprise, in fact, was in space dock. And for this particular mission, space dock, it left space dock in order to accompany Chancellor Gorkon and his crew, Kronos, right, Kronos 1, right, to the peace conference. But of course, a lot of things happened. So that was the mission of the Starship Enterprise for this particular voyage. It wasn't to catalog gaseous anomalies. It was the mission of the USS Excelsior. Although maybe, of course, who knows, the equipment to use for use to catalog gaseous anomalies could be basically on board every standard Federation starship. Who knows? So maybe that's the case. Who knows? But anyway, if anyone has any, comments on that, please let me know. W Forge, yes, I think that was a mistake. Yes, thank you very much. Also, right, Uhuru, right, in the closing credits, right? That's not Uhuru, of course, it's Uhura. So that was a typo. I don't know. Has it been corrected in any of the subsequent, say, Blu-ray releases, etc. of the film? I don't recall it being corrected, because the closing credits, Nichelle Nichols' character of Uhura is spelled, at least I remember I caught this when it was first actually in the theater, so I was very proud of myself for catching it. Oh, that's a mistake. It's Uhuru, right? It's spelled that way, but that's incorrect. It should be Uhura, as we know. So anyway, what was I saying about that? So yes, so by the way, yes, so I saw this in the theater with my mom, and it was marketed at the time to be the final mission. And of course, this is 1991, and so 1991, we're already well into the great series that is Star Trek: The Next Generation. And so, and there's of course, this is going to be in many ways a type of this period. The 1990s is going to be, or kind of usher in a really a wonderful period of Star Trek in sort of and various forms of media. So but we have now the film, Star Trek 6: The Undiscovered Country, with this original crew. So there are a number of questions that were in my mind when we went into the theater, which was, how would they end this particular run of this crew and this new, well, the Enterprise A, and how would they handle this idea maybe of a type of continuity, or attempt to make continuity bridges with the now ongoing series of The Next Generation? Would there need to be any type of attempts or any types of maybe overtures over to the Next Generation crew? And if so, how would that happen? Because as we know, in terms of the continuity and the timeline, it's not quite a direct handover because there's quite a difference of years in between, say, the time continuity of this particular crew, and then the continuity that we see in the ongoing series. So, or the Next Generation series. So there were those questions as well. And of course, too, that would mean that, right, where there's a beginning, there is an end, right? And so, and that end could come in any form. And so it was not just out of curiosity, but also out of a bit of trepidation, because we don't know, or I didn't know at the time going into the theater, if this would mean the end of the crew, if this would mean like an actual, maybe violent end, as in end death of characters. I didn't know what would be on the agenda of the film, as it were, going in. So there was also an air of excitement as well, because the marketing was stellar. I've mentioned it before, but I'll say it again. Those trailers for this film in particular, Star Trek Six, the teaser trailer with the underbelly of the Enterprise, which is actually, I understand, that shot, that very famous gliding shot that I think was from Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and they've projected all these images from the series and past movies and the like. So it's just, it's incredible. I really like there's one juxtaposition in particular, I think, at the end of Kirk and Spock. They're sitting together, and what is it? From the episode, right? What is it? From Where No Man Has Gone Before, and then also where they're sitting together in Star Trek Five. The scene where Spock has identified or recognized Cybok on the video, the sort of the hostage video that he sends out from Nimbus 3 in the earlier film, and so that juxtaposition of the two of them sitting there is great. And also, there's a turn of Chekhov, which is that turn in. It's also in Star Trek Five. It's really great. I love the Star Trek Five. I love how much time Star Trek Five is given in that teaser trailer to Star Trek Six, by the way. And also, there is what's called, I think, the full trailer, which was the coolest thing, and I was enthralled by that. It had right. There's a moment where it just kind of kicks in, and uh, Kim Cattrall says, "They're coming about." Valeris. They're coming about, referring to the battle cruiser, right? The Klingon battle cruiser. And then it just and I forget the tagline exactly, but the crew fights not to win wars, but to end them forever. So it links to it links to the tagline, or one of the taglines for the film, which is "The battle for peace has begun." So that is in itself a type of kind of a paradox, right? The battle for peace. How can you have a fight, for peace? It's very much similar to that wonderful, brilliant paradox in Doctor Strangelove, right? Generally, you can't fight in here. This is the war room. So this is that has that type of paradoxical feel to it. However, and we'll get to that as well, the Cold War, and in fact, 20th century geopolitics is very much on the table here in Star Trek Six, as well as Shakespeare and other allusions. But what was I? So yes, so the trailer was so cool, because then it kicks into high gear in that final part with the da, 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 and then you have Azit Bor, the shot of Azit Bor, and then she's talking to the Federation, right? Federation's president, and also Sarek there as well. We would consider any attempt to rescue them an act of war. And you have a shot of the Romulan ambassador, which is, I think, from the extended version, actually, not in the theatrical cut, which is, he says, "There will never be a better time." And you get a shot of, "This is Captain Sulu, USS Excelsior. We stand ready to assist you." No Christian Slater in that clip, by the way. So it's interesting to see where Christian Slater fits into the crew of the USS Excelsior. And then there's a shot of Bones. "Oh, this is fun." And then we've got all these clips of the orb being, which is the Klingon trial, and Rurapente, and fighting, and Iman, and all this stuff. And then there's a shot of, which is probably one of the key, and I think one of the most controversial scenes in the film, and we'll talk about that later when we get to that scene, which is the mind melt scene. Spock, almost forcible, not almost, he's forcibly applying the mind melt to Valeris, which is very, very. It's we'll get to that later. It's a really intense and yeah, that is a really, really intense scene. We'll get to that later, but that has a there's a quick shot of that, and then of course it cuts into Christopher Plummer, and it mixes up the line a little bit, but that's okay because it's a trailer. Because he says, right, you do prefer it this way, don't you? As it was meant to be. Ah, warrior to warrior, and you see the shot of Kirk being vaporized, and so I remember that too because my mom saw the trailer, and so she thought that in this film, Kirk would meet his end, and so she was very, very much afraid that Captain Kirk would die in this film, and that was her fear was spurred on by the fact that there was this clip in the trailer of the death of Kirk at the outside of the shield, the barrier, I suppose, where they can now be transported out of Repente, but. That is, of course, the confrontation between Martia and Kirk. I guess we can put Bones in there. I love the fight between Martia Kirk, and Kirk, and they're rolling, and they roll over Bones, and Bones like, oh, so I can't help but laugh at that yeah. But and then Scotty says, oh, she can't take much more of this, and then the turn of Chang, and he says, "Cry havoc, shields, and let slip the dogs of war. Fire, da da da, the Star Trek 6, the undiscovered country," and then those date, da 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 da. Right, so that's great. So that really filled me with so much excitement. And I must say that this was before YouTube. The 90s, right, the early 90s. This is way before YouTube, so now of course you can watch that trailer over and over and over again, but I didn't have that opportunity. But the you'd sometimes watch trailers on that would be playing on rental VHS tapes, just randomly placed. And then so whenever I'd get a VHS rental of some other film and the trailer for Star Trek 6 came out, I'd probably watch the trailer more than I did the rental. You know what I mean? That was just one of the best trailers I've ever seen in my life. It probably ranks up there, maybe. It's probably, I would say, if I had to rank trailers, and I've never done that before, but if I had to rank trailers, it would be my maybe it could in fact be my number one favorite trailer of all time. Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country. That was such an exciting trailer. I can't believe. And then so, but and then so in that excitement, I went into the film, and there were shocks. There were surprises. There were a lot of shocks in this film for me. It was really quite violent, and it was very intense, and it was very ominous and portentous, and it had this feeling of there was also dread in the air. And there were these references as well to history that at the time I wasn't quite sure of, and then later I began to gain more sort of appreciation of the historical links or the references and allusions that this film in particular was making to history. And as I say, in particular, the context of 20th century geopolitics, or real politics, or realpolitik, as it were. And then and there are many allusions. I remember in the theater at the time, one of the biggest. There were so many laughs in this film, by the way. So many people in the theater. A lot of people were laughing out loud. This was such a participatory type of atmosphere. And one of the biggest laughs is early on in the film, where the crew is being briefed, or they're being given their new mission by the CNC and this Starfleet Council, and also the speech by Spock about Kirk and the Enterprise will be the quote-unquote olive branch, and the mission is to accompany Chancellor Gorkon to this peace conference. And so, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so it was Spock who personally vouched. You personally vouched, and Spock says. So, and then at the end, right? It's Spock says, right, there's an old Vulcan proverb: only Nixon could go to China. And this got a huge laugh in the audience, I remember, and I didn't quite get it at the time. Right, what was I? I was what 11 or 12 or so, but a little bit later, during the VHS rental period of Star Trek Six, I was beginning to understand a little bit more about the historical reference of that Nixon reference, Richard Nixon reference. So, and then there are others as well that came up, and we'll talk about maybe in passing. Adlai Stevenson, UN ambassador, and also Chamberlain, and also, of course, Cold War and Gorkon. I remember too the Siskel and Ebert. Um, the Siskel and Ebert review at the time was emphasizing how they understood that Chancellor Gorkon was a direct reference to Mikhail Gorkon, and they thought it was a little bit too on the nose, if I remember correctly. But in fact, but at the same time, yes, this is actually quite an apropos interpretation of Gorkon, because as we know, the character of Gorkon is really the character that is a a Klingon character in a very, very high position, chancellor of the High Council, and also he is the one who is making the overture to peace with the Federation. Now, perhaps due to circumstances that are beyond his control, namely the destruction or maybe the mutilation of the moon of Praxis, which we understand was a key energy facility, and also the destruction, or half of the destruction, or a significant portion of the destruction, because as we know from the readout of the USS Excelsior, it's not the entire moon that's destroyed. It's like this, and like the jagged part of it. It's like the return of the Jedi Death Star kind of thing, Praxis, right? So we understand that it significantly damaged the atmosphere of the Klingon home planet, and so the ozone, and so this means that the oxygen will have been depleted, thus causing the calculation saying that the Klingon Empire has roughly 50 years of life left to it, according to the CNC. So there is a lot going on, and then of course there are many parallels to the Soviet Union, and the Klingon Empire seems in that type of interpretation rubric. This Klingon Empire would seem to be standing in for the Soviet Union in this type of science fiction metaphor. And so in that case, I remember to Praxis and the destruction of Praxis in this huge accident type of way. I don't know. Well, actually, we don't know what the circumstances were, at least in the context of the film. However, we do know that it was a very, very serious accident. We also can assume that it caused damage and destruction and death. And also parallels were made to Chernobyl. So this is to say that there were so many things that are wrapped up in this film, and not least of which, of course, being a Star Trek film with Kirk's, Scotty's, Spock's, Bones, Uhura, Chekhov, etc. And then Sulu on the Excelsior, of course, and then Valeris, and we'll talk about Valeris as well. And so this is there's a lot going on. Let me just put it that way. But of course, what else is new, right? I mean, this is one of the great joys of watching a film like Star Trek 6 or like the other Star Trek films. There's so much going on at once, as well as, of course, seeing what will happen in terms of when the credits roll and this film ends. So this is a quite a packed film. And I can say, too, that when the film was over in the theater, I was elated. I was ecstatic. I felt like there was a real sense of joy and ecstasy. And there was a sense of triumph as well as a type of bittersweet farewell and goodbye that I think was a really finely tuned, save for, of course, for that type of the name of Uhura, by the way. But still, it was a finely tuned farewell and adieu, and maybe for some au revoir as well, because we will see some of these people again, maybe in various forms, maybe not together, but we will see them again in some form or another in future adventures, but at least for now, it was a fine and fitting send-off to one of the great gatherings of characters in sort of a modern cinema and television entertainment history. So, Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. That is my opening salvo. Before we get into some specifics, let us go to the chat. Oh, I see. I'm at the part where it's Christian Slater. There's yes, the Christian Slater bit. I thought, I don't know. Did anyone else feel the same way? I thought, right, because when Christian Slater is opening the door and Sulu is asleep and he wakes up and it's Christian's kind of in silhouette, kind of in shadow, but you can still make out his face. I thought Christian's. Oh no, is Christian Slater gonna kill Sulu? No, say it ain't so. And because it was lit so ominously, but it was just right. It was. But anyway, yes, Christian Slater, and of course, don't forget Janice Rand too is on the Excelsior. It's great, so it's great to see her as well. And of course, we will see references to this particular moment or in the Excelsior too when we get to maybe other aspects of Star Trek and maybe other series, Voyager, right? So this is something that may come up. So just in case you're interested, it's a very interesting world Star Trek is. Let's see. Neo Blissy says, by the way, the translator during Kirk and McCoy's trial is Claw, the Klingon captain. Is that true? I never knew that. Really? Neo Blissy, you teach me new things every single time. Thank you. That's Claw. No kidding. Wow. So yeah, you're talking about the translator in the translator booth there. I think maybe atop one of those offices, perhaps, looking down to the trial area with Chang, of course, and Colonel, right? It's Colonel Worf, right? I want to say. And yeah, that's great. I didn't know that. Wow. So maybe when he was doing the translations, he was saying like, and now General Chang's like, doing that, right? Because he likes to do that a lot. And oh, yeah, I'm going to feel that tomorrow. All right. All right. So the trial scene is awesome. Yes. Yes, as Jerome Weaselberry says. That's an amazing, and the beam of light. I always, the beam of light, it reminded me of a number of things. It reminds me of like I don't know. It reminds me of the beam of light that we saw in Star Trek: The Motion Picture with V'ger and Ilea and Decker. And the whole that just turns into that reminded me of that. Also, later when I saw a film which is called The Dark Knight Rises, it's a film, Batman film, and there's a scene involving this tunnel of sorts or this hole, and a main character has to climb up a particular hole or something. So it reminded me a lot of that as well. So it's like, oh, Kirk and Bones are trapped in the same place as Bruce Wayne. So what are they gonna do? Maybe they have to climb out or something like that, or maybe they're gonna go climb out and go with Bruce Wayne. It's Bruce Wayne and Kirk and McCoy. They're gonna go and fight. Oh, so you came back to die with your city, and who are these people with you? These are my friends, Kirk and McCoy, and we've came back to stop you. Kirk, get him. And Kirk's like, get him, Bones. And Bones and Kirk are now fighting Bane. Oh, it'd be cool. What a great crossover. But anyway. Yeah, so what was I saying? Yeah, so that's the trial. And of course, there's this wonderful crossover moment here in the trial sequence in terms of I love this trial sequence so much for a number of reasons, many of which you've already alluded to, but this is one of the most peculiar points of history, crossover history that's happening in this moment, right? Because we have Chang, who is now not just a formidable, maybe he's General Chang, so we have the assumption that he is a formidable military figure in the Klingon Empire. And that was before the scene in terms of his introduction, when he's beamed aboard the Enterprise. I've so wanted to meet you, Captain. I'm not sure how to take that. Oh, sincere admiration from one warrior to another. Right. So that was the introduction. Takba, takbe. We'll get to that later, of course. But now he is now not just in sort of military situation, but he is in a tribunal situation as well. So he is also a lawyer or a trained lawyer, or we assume that he is a trained lawyer, and therefore he has this this ability to. Well, we understand too that through his lawyering skills, he is quite a formidable adversary, excuse me. And so this is a very, very important aspect to General Chang's character. So that's one thing. And then I mentioned too the peculiar and wonderfully peculiar crossover of history, because there is, of course, Kirk and McCoy that are at the center of these proceedings. And so this is the present, the moment of time, of course. And we have Worf, who is, of course, going to be kind of the descendant, if you will, of another character who is called Worf in the Next Generation series. And so this is also this lineage that we see making a direct reference to. So it's a reference to the future. And of course, there's a reference to the past too, because not only do we get well, not lovely, but we get all the brilliantly placed references to geopolitics of the 20th century throughout the film. But here in this particular scene, we get one of those key phrases, right? Don't wait for the translation, answer me now. That is a take, a riff, if you will, off of the exchange in reference to ambassadors, right, to the UN from the U.S. and Soviet Union, respectively, and so Adlai Stevenson and the exchange with him and Zoran, and so this is the in the context, right, of the heightened Cold War tensions, and so this is really the wonderful peculiarity of the cross section of history, not just Star Trek history, past and present and future, but also 20th century history. So this is a remarkable scene for many reasons, as well as too as being yet another introduction into the culture and the ways of the Klingon Empire. And this is the way in which justice is meted out in, or at least one form of justice is meted out in from a manner of speaking anyway, in terms of the Klingon court system, or one aspect of the Klingon court system. So here we get more introductions into the world. So this is a really fascinating scene through and through, I think. So let's see here. All right, now. Okay, and oh, Bartholomew is here. Hello, it's nice to see you. Obi says, aha, Kirk would have phasered Bane real quick. Yes. Let's see. Meow, Nyan is here. Oh, thank you very much. Meow, that's very kind of you. You left a super chat. That's very kind. Thank you so much. And you say, fun fact, Shatner was Plummer's understudy in their Shakespeare days. Even covered for him when Plummer had food poisoning. Yes. Yes. Mountains out of molehills. Yes, Colonel Worf. Yes, exactly. Thank you so much. And Rod is here. Thank you very much, Rod. It's nice to see you. It's very nice to see you. Okay, so now, with those details, let's go to the opening. Now, the opening, when you get in there, and the credits, and of course the star field, and the purplish font, and it's of course the recognized Star Trek font. Let's call it the Star Trek font. I love the font, by the way. And again, all the way through the series, I think the only time we didn't see this famous Star Trek font was in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, in that particular title sequence there with the blue, I don't know what you call it, let's call it the Wrath of Khan font there. But here we have the wonderful great font over the star field, purplish hue. And we see the regular names. Of course, we don't see the name of Harve Bennett, of course, which is noticeable. We do see the return of Nicholas Meyer. Um, we see um, Ralph Winters, Steve Charles Jaffe, and we see Leonard Nimoy in executive producer role, and the like. And I think for a lot of people too at the time, and especially, and even now, of course, but at the time, upon initial release, the return of Nicholas Meyer to the director's chair was a really big deal. It was a really, really big deal because, of course, the expectations now were very high because his prior uh, directed project in the Star Trek universe had been, of course, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. So the expectations, I think, were for those who were fans of the Star Trek films, the expectations were through the roof, and so we get that not reveal, but we get that, of course, in the opening credits. However, what we also get in the opening credits is the ominous, chilling music. This music, this is what is it? Cliff Idleman's score. This score is electrifying. This is really, really electrifying. I think in a past comment on a previous video, Scott, our dear friend Scott Johansson, made the comment about the brilliance of this score, and I really have to agree. It's a surprising turn, right? If we think back on all of the past Star Trek films' opening sequence or opening titles music, they've always been, for the most part, quite triumphant in tone. Think back of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, the triumphant Jerry Goldsmith theme, the now famous theme for Star Trek. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, it was that brilliant James Horner kind of new Star Trek theme, in a manner of speaking. And then Star Trek III: The Search for Spock, again, Horner is there. And then you have sort of the Spock theme, and then the Voyage Home would have this very jubilant, triumphant theme, dun 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 da 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 da, right? And then Star Trek V, of course, the Jerry Goldsmith here, and it has that da 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 da. So it's got this. Oh, it's great. Let's. It's a fist pumping action type of thing, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not so with 6. Very interestingly enough, it's not fist pumping. It's very ominous. It's very dark. And it's got that so that's my impression. That's my impression of the Star Trek 6 theme, and already my throat is becoming quite hoarse because it has that da da na 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 dun dun da 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 dun 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 da 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 da. It's da 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 dun dun da 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 da, and it has that really almost unnerving build up. Dun dun da 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 da. Boom, Praxis. Boom. Wow. This is a kind of in this way, this is almost setting up the fact, almost telegraphing that this might be a different kind of Star Trek film than the ones we might have been used to leading up to this film. And I can dare say, too, that if one follows that hypothesis in examining this, so I think there can be a lot of there can be a lot of support for that hypothesis going forward, how this is almost in a lot of ways a different type of Star Trek film. It is still the same or similar in spirit to past stories and past adventures, and I'll get to that too, but this also has the potential of being very different. And so this is a thrilling this is so thrilling in terms of an opening. What an opener this is. And then it ends with a bang. It literally does, with Praxis. And then we get the wonderful introduction, the reintroduction of the USS Excelsior, again, ending its 3-year mission of cataloging gaseous planetary anomalies. Maybe they cataloged well, I guess they wouldn't have to catalog the Mutara Nebula, because the Mutara Nebula, we would assume, is probably, if it's still there, it's probably not there anymore because of the explosion of the Reliant. But anyway, yeah, but they would have cataloged, I'm assuming, gaseous anomalies much similar to what we saw in 2 in the Mutara Nebula. But of course, I digress. And so they're finishing, and so what would Sulu do after he finished? He's enjoying his tea, right? And of course, what signals ominous signs better than a rattling teacup that falls off a table? My God, shields, shields, boom, and then the wave hits the Excelsior. Now I remember, I have 2 memories of this. So first is, do you remember I don't watch them as much anymore, but back in the day, the early 90s, I guess 90, 91, 92, I watched the Academy Awards on TV when they were broadcast, and I'd record them on VHS tape, and I'd watch them over and over and over again. So I remember this is the time where Jack Palance was doing the one-arm push-ups on stage, and this was the where it was the year of what was it, Silence of the Lambs and Unforgiven, and that sort of, and then so I think it was in 91, right, where it was the year of Silence of the Lambs. And I think this was the year too where Star Trek 6: The Undiscovered Country was nominated in a number of sort of technical categories, including sound-related categories. And I remember the broadcast for the Academy Awards that year had this scene being the scene used as the example for sound, and the way the wave and the voices and the sounds of the bridge of the Excelsior and shields, shields. Right, that's so that was one memory. And then the second memory too was in the theater. Again, I went where my mom took me to watch this in the theater, and when the wave hit the Excelsior with that violent crash, boom, and people fall over, my mom grabbed my arms. She was so scared that maybe something terrible might happen to Sulu. Um, but Sulu here, to his great credit, he has the great piloting skills, and his first instinct is to tell to the helmsman, right, what is it, a starboard thruster, turn her into the wave, and so it's starboard thruster. It goes like this. Although, if you look at it, is it actually starboard thruster or port thruster? I think the way it turns it's actually suggesting that the left side engine is giving off energy. And so it looks like it's maybe the port thruster, not the star. But anyway, that's I'm not so good with my technical details. But anyway, it turns from left to right into the center of the wave, or facing the wave. So this is a great detail of Sulu, and then we get the analysis of the destruction, or significant destruction, of Praxis, the scene with one person, we assume on Praxis, burning to death, which is a really violent, terrible scene, and Brigadier Kurla, and he says, there has been an incident. This transmission ends now. Brigadier Kurla, when does it end, by the way? It ends now. You mean now? Yeah, it ends now. And then cuts to the Klingon, that, I guess, that logo, right? So and then it goes to from there, and then we get, of course, some action from the Excelsior, and then we get the Rand and the like. So a number of things also are set up here too, which is Sulu is the captain of the Excelsior. And just before I move on, I should point out that I might have mentioned it in the Wrath of Khan discussion, but for those who are really, really knowledgeable of Wrath of Khan details, you will no doubt be aware of, there is a type of legendary lost footage in Wrath of Khan, or relating to Wrath of Khan, that never made it to the final cut. And to my knowledge, there isn't any footage of this thing that I'm about to say, although I think there is audio that exists, which is in the shuttlecraft sequence when the crew are approaching the Enterprise at the beginning of that film. And the scene is with the crew, but with then Admiral Kirk, and he says, "I hate inspections." And Sulu says, "I'm delighted. Any chance to get aboard the Enterprise." and you see him mouth some words, but you don't hear what he's saying because it then cuts to another shot and the music takes over. The idea is that Sulu and Kirk would then have had an additional bit of conversation to have revealed to us that Sulu would have been having his own command at the, what was it, the end of the month, of a ship which was called the Excelsior, I think, right? So it would have been in another alternate universe had that particular line of dialogue been included, and that had that storyline been carried through for the Wrath of Khan. Because, of course, as we know, I think at the time, the assumption being that maybe The Wrath of Khan would have been the last Star Trek film because of the events that ended that particular film. But of course, it had a long life post Star Trek 2. So that changed certain things. So there could have been a circumstance where we might have seen Sulu captain the USS Excelsior much earlier in the continuity. That's my point. But of course, then the continuity was established in terms of the end of 2 into 3, and then the idea being that now this continuity is established, so Sulu is now seeing the Excelsior for the first time, I'm assuming, when they return to space dock, and the Great Experiment, as it's called, and he admires the Excelsior even then. And then in 4, we understand that right at the end of the film, he says, with all respect, Doctor, I'm counting on Excelsior. Excelsior, right? As Scotty, and you could see the look of shock on his face when he's like, "Oh, Scotty, I'm sorry. Gosh, calm down, Scotty. Excelsior!" And so so Sulu has always had a great admiration for the Excelsior, and it's great, therefore, that he is now the captain of the Excelsior. So this is a very important point that's being established here as well. And also, and I'm sorry about this, one other thing too, because he's the captain of the Excelsior, and because we see Rand, and because we see these familiar elements, now we can regard the Excelsior as a type of ally to the Enterprise. Before, it had this somewhat rival type of antagonistic relationship with the Enterprise, of course, especially, or not especially, primarily due to Part 3, and with the so-called transwarp drive and styles and the right, right, this guy. So this is the kind of great turn, to borrow wrestling terminology, the heel has become a face. So a type of bad guy has become a good guy. And so this is a really wonderful turn, I think. So now we have the Excelsior now fully established. And should we contact Starfleet? Are you kidding me? And he goes to a nighttime shot of San Francisco. And I don't think we've seen in the films nighttime shots of San Francisco. We did see San Francisco under storm in Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, but when that storm subsided, then it revealed the sunshine. So we did see some sun. Oh, actually, maybe I take that back. Maybe we did see some nighttime shots through Kirk's apartment window in some scenes in 2 and 3. But in any event, here we have a nighttime shot. We understand it's early morning here because of what is said, how the meeting is described. They're meeting in the morning. So the CNC and Spock, and right, the idea is now they are getting older in age, and they are acknowledging it, the crew. Maybe they're going to give us a retirement party, and I have to teach a class at the academy, says Uhura. So what are we doing here? Where's Spock? And so they assemble, and of course they get the mission here about the explanation about praxis, and excuse me, which I understand they described as a few months ago, I think. So some time has passed, and so now the Klingon Empire has roughly 50 years of life left to it, and so they need to have type of peace negotiations to settle this long-term conflict that has occurred between the Klingon Empire and the Federation. So here we have the early discussions of what the plans are, and also some revelations about some characters, their feelings about this particular situation. So another thing, the mission, of course, is now Kirk is going to take the crew of the Enterprise and escort Gorkon to this to the peace conference of some sort. So it's very much like a journey to Babel-ish type of thing. And there will be also some intrigue too in terms of how that is carried out, and the deception and assassination, which is also very much like the original original series. And so that is one of the ways in which this film is very much in keeping with the original series, in my view. But as I said earlier, the hypothesis is, while it has certain links to the past, it also is forging some really quite, I would say, even intensely unique, and maybe in some senses controversial, new ground in terms of its exploration of the Star Trek universe. But in this way, it has this feeling of continuity from the past. And so there is an unease and tension in particular. So, and I must say, too, that I was so surprised by Admiral Cartwright. Not only do we see him return, we saw him, of course, in Star Trek 4 in a very memorable role. But here we have Admiral Cartwright, and Admiral Cartwright is voicing some pretty intense and tough takes on what to do with the Klingon Empire here. And so it's a little bit hard to take, to be perfectly honest. So this is very striking and startling. But I think that's one of the reasons too why this film is very strong the way it does it. It doesn't seem to be shying away from doing these with characters that maybe they are very secondary characters, perhaps, in the whole grand scheme of the Star Trek storytelling. Right, because of course we follow Kirk and the crew, but Admiral Cartwright is in many ways a type of there is a sense of what he brought and what his character meant to the world of, say, Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. And so we hear his comments, and that's actually quite, it strikes quite a shocking tone. And it's even, I think, emphasized too by the fact that Kirk agrees with Admiral Cartwright about essentially taking advantage of the situation and almost exploiting the situation in order to assure a type of military advantage over the Klingon Empire, bringing the Klingon Empire to its knees, and then we will be in a better position to negotiate. And the idea of a type of prejudice that is being expressed here, and Kirk too shares this feeling of prejudice, and he expresses it. He says, "I'm afraid I'm going to have to agree with Admiral Cartwright." I think he says, "I'm afraid I'm going to have to." So I think there is also in the room a sense of an acknowledgement of how this is a bit of a touchy subject. But the CNC says, despite the feelings of you and Admiral Cartwright, we're going to try to work out a peaceful solution. And so we understand that maybe the CNC is like Spock, trying to find the avenue for peace and reaching out to Gorkon. And so we understand that already the reach out has been made to Gorkon through channels established by Spock, we understand, or assumed to have been maybe inspired or pushed upon or pushed along by Sarek as well. So herein lies the brilliantly established dilemma. And then we have intertwined into this a sense of prejudice and a sense of the geopolitics of Star Trek, which is very much paralleling, obviously, the situation of the 20th century, geopolitical situation of the 20th century, global diplomacy, global politics, and also the idea of a 20th century American history as well. So this is really much, and I think this point is brought home by the quote that I mentioned earlier, which is, there's an old Vulcan proverb, only Nixon could go to China. And I must say, too, that the venom that is in the voice of Kirk, right, he says, right, when he and Spock are alone in the room after the meeting has been adjourned, and talking about the Klingons, he says, "Don't believe them. Don't trust them." And then Spock says, "They're dying. Let them die." This is really shocking stuff. Really, really shocking stuff. And then he also reveals, too, that the crew is planning to stand down in 3 months. And so he says, "You should have trusted me." And Spock does that thing. And then we see the long shot of them across this wide expanse of the table to visually suggest the expanse between the two men. So this is already establishing There's a distance between the two of them, which is also quite startling too, because we've known all the way up to the films, especially 2, 3, 4, and 5, that there is this closeness between them. So here's another way that the film is, I think, challenging the Star Trek mythos in a very vital and quite tantalizing way. Here we see a potential rift between the two who have always been so close. So here's yet another unique difference in how this film seems to be presenting the lore, and then goes into the introduction of the crew meeting back to the Enterprise A. I think there's one bit where it actually recycles one of the shots from Star Trek 4, the bit where the reveal of the Enterprise A in Star Trek 4. I think that shot is recycled for this particular film. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But every other shot is, I think, not repurposed, but a special effects shot, especially made for this film. Incidentally, we should really applaud the special effects here. They're just dynamite, just really brilliant. And so we go on to this bridge, which is a lot of monitors on this bridge this time around, and I love the sound effect that's really emphasized here, the sound effect of the opening and closing of the doors, which is of course calling back to the original series, I think. And also we have the introduction of Valeris, who graduated first at the academy, the first time a Vulcan ever did that, according to Spock, I think. And so this is Kim Cattrall's character. And so the idea too was it's, I think, been reported upon a lot, and Nicholas Meyer, I think, has mentioned it in a lot of the behind the scenes materials. But there have been plans that this could have been Savick, and there were plans that it might have been, had things turned out differently, it might have been Kirstie Alley and Savick, and that would have been a really fascinating turn for a number of reasons. I think one of the weaknesses for me of the film is not in any way the Valeris character per se, because Kim Cattrall's Valeris character is quite an interesting one, but it seems like when you have a crew, excuse me, where you had, oh, I know, oh, Kirk, I know you. We've gone, I know Kirk, I know Spock, I know Scotty, I know Uhura, Chekhov, and McCoy. So I know these. So I have all these people and Valeris. So you think when you get to the later part of the film, and you have to think who in the group is the traitor, right? Who is the killer when you get into the Sherlock Holmes aspect of the film? So if you're thinking about your suspects, who could it be? And so it's like, okay, you kind of guess early on that it's going to be Valeris, who might be doing might be doing some things, and in fact it is revealed that it is her. So it wasn't any surprise, I should say, when the reveal came a little bit later that it was Valeris who's behind, who's part of the conspiracy. We're not sure exactly what she did because it's not revealed in the film, but you can assume that she killed those two crewmen who were the people who went on to the Klingon ship with the gravity boots and assassinated all the people there, including Chancellor Gorkon. And then she killed them with in close range to the head, which is a really violent way to go, by the way. So we can assume that maybe she did that. I don't know. We can also assume that maybe she altered the computer log to show that the Enterprise indeed did fire the torpedoes onto the Klingon battlecruiser, where in fact they were all accounted for visually, according to Scotty. So you can assume that she probably did those things as well. But that wasn't a surprise to me. So that felt. But it wasn't anything to do with her character per se, but it was just the way that it was set up. Now, if that character had been Savick, I think that would have been a really shocking turn. That would have been so shocking, and it would have been really surprising in that way too. And so that would have been, I think, dramatically very effective. But right, be that as it may, for what it is, I get where it's going, and maybe too, the point is not to catch us off guard in terms of surprising us. Oh, it's actually Valeris who is part of the conspiracy. Maybe it wasn't the point to do that, but it was just merely to to emphasize less the idea of the mystery and the surprise, but rather the idea of the conspiracy and the web of conspiracy, because it'll be revealed later in the mind meld scene, which is, as I indicated earlier, in my mind, and I think the mind of others, a very controversial scene. We will see that the web of conspiracy does reach out in many ways. So, therefore, the role in the context of the drama of the Valeris character, therefore, is not necessarily to be the the reveal, the surprise reveal in a mystery per se, but rather the way in which we can further get information about the conspiracy. So in that way, it works. I appreciate that. But from the mystery angle, maybe I don't know if it was as big a surprise as they had maybe initially planned it. But still, nothing against the character, because she says, right, um, um, she gives the idea of the, regulations specify thrusters only while in space dog, and then right. What is it? What is Kirk command there? What was it? 1/4 impulse power. Um, right. Yeah, which is strange too, because I think in Star Trek 3, when they were in space dock, he didn't use command 1/4 impulse power until after they had left space dock. So it's an interesting thing. So maybe he's just yeah, whatever. I'm just gonna do 1/4 impulse power and just get out of here. So. And then we have, therefore, too, from there, before we get to the Klingons, we have the brief scene between Spock and Valeris. And Valeris, I don't understand this representation. It's meant to the idea of the illusion that all things come to an end, and this is the idea that Spock says, "This will be my final. This will be my final time as a member of this crew." And it is his hope that she will replace him. And she says, "I could only succeed you, sir," in a kind of gesture of respect towards her mentor. And there's a suggestion that maybe, and again, we don't know, we can only speculate, but maybe there's something a little bit more between them, Spock and Valeris. We're not quite sure, but in any event, there is a close relationship, at least a sort of mentor-mentee type of relationship between them. And we also know that Valeris is very brilliant, very intelligent. So Spock understands that she would be a worthy member of the crew for future voyages. Also in the scene, we get some really interesting maybe evolutions, if you will, of the philosophy of Spock. Right here, he says, logic is not the end, but is only the beginning of knowledge. And so this is almost a very tacit acknowledgement of the fact that maybe he, as a Vulcan, who has been trained and educated in the Vulcan ways, as we see in Part 4, right? Because he did die and essentially come back to life, and then became re-educated in the Vulcan ways with that wonderful supercomputer. Correct. How do you feel? What? I don't understand the question. Right. So so he is he is a what was it? So he is educated in the Vulcan ways, but it's an interesting thing too. Maybe we're seeing here the hint of a change in his demeanor and his approach to logic. And maybe he might see a type of hybrid approach to his philosophy. And two, we might see here hints at emotional outbursts, which might come up a little bit later in the film. And I allude to that mind melt scene. And two, this might have something to do with the fact that his overtures towards Gorkon here seem to be suggesting a type of attempt at some kind of diplomacy with the overarching purpose and goal of intergalactic peace. He was never this type of diplomat prior, at least to my understanding. And indeed, in the original series, those of you who know the series well, you can probably attest to the fact that he was very far from being a diplomat. He was very much undiplomatic in a lot of ways. He favored logic over everything else, much to the chagrin of his crew in a lot of ways. But here, there seems to be this approach towards an almost détente, if you will, between the push and pulls of logic and emotion. Or maybe emotion is not the right word, but logic and something beyond logic. Again, to borrow the phrase from from V'ger, or not V'ger, but Star Trek: The Motion Picture. What V'ger needs is a human quality, our capacity to leap beyond logic. And I think that is a really interesting hint. Logic is only the beginning of knowledge. So anyway, this is very suggestive of a new thing, or possible new thing. And to finally, before I get to the chat, this might indicate something that possibly, maybe, who knows, might come up somewhere down the line in something called Star Trek: The Next Generation. Who knows? But anyway, let us end that for anyone who has yet to enjoy the great things that is Star Trek: The Next Generation. But for those of you who know The Next Generation, I think you know what I'm talking about. So, but now we will go to the chat, and we will go to, let's see, here we go. Oh, yes, Mountains Out of Molehills. Ricardo Montalban is in The Naked Gun. Yes. One of my favorite scenes in it's Star Trek. So, right, the pen scene. Remember the pen scene? Oh, this is a pen from Emperor Hirohito. Uh, you know, impervious to everything but water. It's great. And then, like, I love the bit where he sees the fish later. That's great. Yes, I love that. Yes. All right. Here we go. Where is he? Oh, Scott Johansson says, I'm still lost on Kirk's comment to Spock in that scene. You should have trusted me. Yes. Yes, Spock did, or Spock wouldn't have suggested Kirk for this mission. Yes, that's right. Yeah. And that's why Spock's like that. He signs like, that's exactly why, Jim. What are you talking about? That's probably the reason why there's silence between the two of them. Good point, Scott. Good point. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Oh, Vincent Spinella is here. Hello. I should watch Star Trek 6 again one day. Yes, it's oh yes, if you get a chance, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Yeah, great. Yes, Neo Blissy, thank you. Valeris was indeed supposed to have been Savick, but whether through a combination of Gene Roddenberry's objections, yes, I know that too. Kim Cattrall not wanting to be a third Savick, or either option alone. Yes, I know. And so the like, and also, yes, I forgot to mention too, for Gene Roddenberry, right? This is, of course, this film came about around the time of Gene Roddenberry's passing. Later on, Nicholas Meyer, I think, did mention in a number of the documentaries, for example, about his, shall we say, interesting a professional relationship with Gene Roddenberry. And so we understand that Gene Roddenberry, let's put it this way, cared a lot about Star Trek, cared intensely about Star Trek. You could never deny that. And there are stories about how maybe Gene Roddenberry was, shall we say, difficult to work with. But these are from perspectives of people who worked with him directly. All the way back from Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Yes, but no matter what the case may be, it's undoubted. It's without a fact. Without Gene Roddenberry, there wouldn't be the Star Trek that we know. So, yes, this is a really important point I forgot to mention, but this is dedicated to the memory of Gene Roddenberry, for Gene Roddenberry thing. Let's see. W4J could have been Dax. Ooh. Yes. I remember the first time, yeah, Deep Space Nine. I remember that first episode so well. It premiered and it was so exciting, this excitement in the air. And yeah, and Dax, and around the time Hellraiser 3 came out as well. So it was an amazing crossover. Right. Neil Blissy says, the Undiscovered Country could have gotten an R rating by the MPA had the Klingon blood been red. That's why there's no Pepto. There's the Pepto-Bismol blood. Yes, I have heard that too. Although when you get to the right, but it actually becomes an interesting plot point when you get to the extended cut, right? This is not Klingon blood. It's gonna west, right? Yeah. So, yeah. So yeah. All right. Oh, Mountains Out of Molehill says, first time seeing the phaser tear off the Klingon arm. Yeah, yeah, that was really shocking. That was really shocking. Um, Oh, Neoblissy then continues. Of course, the R-rated Klingon blood issue could merely be an urban legend. If it's so, I apologize. Yes, I have heard it too, although maybe what I heard too was an urban legend as well. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure. But of course, yes, it could have been possible. Anything is possible. In any event, yes, Klingon blood is Pepto-Bismol-y. So let's get to the Klingons here, because now we have the mission in due course, and um, they encounter what the ship's is Kronos 1, right? And then this is the battle cruiser that is carrying Gorkon. And it's David Warner. It's St. John Talbot from Star Trek V, kind of, but not really. Or it's the guy from The Omen, or it's the guy from it's David Warner, famous. So it's nice to see that continuity. Well, or non-continuity, I suppose. It's always great to see David Warner, and here is Chancellor Gorkon. So the idea, too, is I think Kirk, much to his credit, or maybe not to his credit, who knows, but much to his credit or discredit, from a manner of speaking, he invites Gorkon and his crew to dinner aboard the Enterprise. So they're going to beam aboard the Enterprise and welcome the crew. And so Valeris mentions the stock of Romulan ale, and there's a reference by Chekhov. Guess who's coming to dinner? And the banquet, or not banquet, but then the beaming aboard of the Klingons. Now, this brings up an interesting bit of continuity, which will be referenced, I think, later on, which is this. Everyone seems to be here in the crew anyway. Everyone seems to be on the or with the impression that this is kind of the first major time that the Klingons and the Federation are coming together in this type of meal manner. You remember what Uhura says later after they leave, did you see the way they eat? To suggest that this is the first time that they're seeing the way they eat. Although it's quite curious because, I mean, they have encountered Klingons in these types of social or quasi-social settings, even as far back as the original series, for one thing. And then also, they actually had a kind of reception with them as recently as part 5. So I don't know what the what the thing is. I mean, did they not see them eating in part 5? Maybe they did, but in any event, it seems to be an interesting way in which this film, part 6, is treating or not treating, in a manner of speaking, the continuity that was brought up in part 5. But in any event, here we have this tense meeting between Klingons and the Federation, and it's brought about first in this transporter scene where excuse me, where what's his name? Gorkon, excuse me, is introducing the key members of his circle, his daughter Azet Boor, and Brigadier Carla, and this is General Chang. And of course, I referenced it earlier. I've so wanted to meet you. I'm not trying to say sincere admiration from one warrior to another. So the idea of warriors, this is going to be a very interesting theme or leitmotif that will be carried out sporadically, but purposefully later on in the film. That leads us to the banquet and the wonderful detail of the Klingons not knowing what to do with the napkins. They're like, I love General Chang's and Azet Boor as well. I think Azet Boor, of all of them, she does the best to try to mask her quizzical approach to the napkins. So she just, yeah. And then Gorkon is all ready to go with the Romulan ale. A toast, the undiscovered country. I'll get to actually, before we get to that, I should mention too, Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 1, the undiscovered country. I mentioned this before, right? Who would fardels bear to Grunton's went under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country, from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will. So it is the understanding, or the generally accepted interpretation of Hamlet, that scene, the soliloquy of Hamlet, where he's questioning whether or not to do something very serious that could potentially cause his death. And so this soliloquy is very famous for a number of things, one of which being we have the contemplation of death. The contemplation of death is so integral to concepts of existence and religion that this is therefore one of the most celebrated passages of the English language, for good reason. And so you don't need me to say this, but so this is a reference. The undiscovered country is oftentimes therefore associated with the idea of death or the realm of death, from whose bourne no traveler returns. And so and embroiled or embedded within that imagery of the undiscovered country is the idea that death is not an end, but rather an unknown or an unknown place. And the idea of going to an unknown place, it puzzles the will. Excuse me. And so, um, um, what was I? So the undiscovered country is, to put it very, very simply, stand-in for death. So then when Gorkhan says a toast, the undiscovered country, and he pauses, and everyone's looking at Gorkhan. Maybe some Shakespeare scholars in the table there probably thinking, "Wait a minute, Gorkhan, are you toasting death? Are you saying that we're all going to die, Gorkhan? I hope not." And then Gorkhan said, "The future." So this is Gorkhan's read on Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 1, which is the undiscovered country means the future. And that's an interesting take on the concept of the undiscovered country. And it's a very optimistic one. And it could also mean, I mean, it could be very consistent too, because if we think of death, death can come in many forms. I mean, that death of the old order for the sake of the new order. And if the old order in Gorkhan's conception is the idea of the quote unquote Cold War between the Klingon Empire and the Federation, then the death of the old order will give rise to the birth of the new order, which is peace, the end of the Cold War, so to speak. So in that way, the undiscovered country is the most apropos type of reference. And also we understand too that the undiscovered country could have been the title for Star Trek II. Of course, Fate would have other ideas, but Fate, being Fate, brought the undiscovered country back to the table when Nicholas Meyer returned to Star Trek VI in the director and other capacities as well. So we have Star Trek VI, the undiscovered country, and then made reference here by Gorkhan. And we have the introduction of Shakespeare, not just Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 1, but, right, say it along with me for those of you who know, one of the great lines of Star Trek: "You have not experienced Shakespeare until you've read him in the original Klingon." And you see the seething look of Kirk, like, right? Because also we understand later that in the trial scene, at least according to General Chang, Shakespeare, he describes Shakespeare to Kirk as being his favorite author. So, so anyway, so the idea when he's quoting Richard II, so the idea here is now Shakespeare's introduced, right? Takba, takbe, right? Which is then borrowed later in terms of the discussion between Chang and Kirk, who are sitting, incidentally, maybe not by coincidence, next to each other. And I love the exchange from Chang. He says, "Captain, would you ever give up Starfleet?" I believe that the captains always believe that the Starfleet's mission has always been one of peace, according to Spock. Far be it to dispute my first officer. No, please, Captain, please, please. In space, all warriors are cold warriors. Here is a direct reference, allusion to the Cold War, cold warriors. Are you fond of... And then the idea of inalienable human rights from Chekhov, and then as it bore counters that, the word inalienable and human rights, and she lashes out and says that the very term is inherently racist, and it is a Homo sapien, that the Federation is a Homo sapiens only club, present company accepted, of course, according to Chang, to try to salvage some bit of decorum in this particular now intensely intensified scene. And so now we have the tensions breaking out. And then the Klingons emerge on Brigadier Kurla and Ezra Borer, reveal that they've believed that this peace will mean the end of the Klingon race, the eradication of the Klingons. And Bones tries to say, that's not true. No, that's not true. And then we get the scene, right? To be or not to be? That is the question which has preoccupied our people, Captain, according to Chang. We need breathing room. And then Kirk says, Earth, Hitler, 1938. I beg your pardon. Silence. This scene and how it's written, how it's constructed is mind-boggling. The amount of references that are going around here, just through the roof, and the back and forth, and almost a ping pong match, right? It's almost like metaphorical ping pong diplomacy going on at once here, and the way that it ends. Well, I see we have a long way to go. Great bit of gray there, by the way. I forget too, that bone, whatever that is, that cane, my goodness. I don't want to go to that cane shop, wherever Chancellor Gorkon got that cane, by the way. But anyway, walking stick, walking bone. And it says, cuts to the scene at the end. We must do this again sometime. You don't trust me, do you? I don't blame you. If there is to be a brave new world, our generation is going to have the hardest time living in it. This is the concept. This is the concept so well stated. A brave new world. This is it. A brave new world. The undiscovered country. The link. And this is what an interesting turn of phrase too. Huxley and Shakespeare. And if you make that link, if those of you who know Brave New World, I'm not sure how in keeping that references to Gorkon's overarching philosophy, but that being, let's table that for another time. In any event, we know that his idea of the new world, the undiscovered country, is an optimistic one, but it's not going to be easy for the current generation. He understands that as well. That is the hopeful side, but then we see the introduction or the reintroduction of Chang. Ah, parting is such sweet sorrow. Have we not heard the chimes at midnight? Duck my chair. And then Kirk's like, ugh. And that's it for this chapter of diplomacy, or failed diplomacy, as Spock might suggest. Black coffee, Bones needs, and he's got headaches. Kirk does, and then Kirk goes to his quarters and he says, for his captain's, he says, last night. We hosted. He says last night. I'm not sure why he says last night, because he just finished hosting. He should have said tonight, I think. But anyway, he's about to go to sleep, but then he's called to the bridge, and so then then herein lies the intrigue, and then here we get the brilliant setup, which is the energy surge, and then suddenly, without warning, the torpedoes are firing. Boom, boom. Once into direct hit, and then another one too, and it knocks the gravitational controls off in the ship, we understand. And we get that scene and chaos on the bridge. They don't know what's going on, and then the idea too, we get the shot of the inside of the Klingon battle cruiser and the ominous two figures with the gravity boots, as we'll understand later, and they're shooting people who are now caught in the gravity, no gravity situation, shooting him. And it was made, right, Neil Blissey and Scott, etc. We're talking about the Klingon blood. This is the CG effects. This is the early 90s, so computer effects were a really new thing. So this was it might seem dated now, but this was really, really new, cutting edge stuff at the time, as I recall. This was right 91, so this was around the time of Terminator 2, and then maybe some Jurassic Park sometime late. But this was that time. So to see this Klingon blood, it was gross and it was shocking at the same. And then the arm coming, that was shocking. And then when they go to the main chamber, and then that's, I think, someone find Chang, who is conspicuously absent, I should say, as it bore, by the way. I'm not sure where she was, but in any event, we have the two of them going into that room. They shoot that one person, and then you see the hold and the look on Gorkon's face. There's a moment in the theater I thought, oh, they're not going to kill him, right? They're not going to kill him. They can't kill David Warner. What are you talking about? They can't kill David Warner. And he does the flip. Oh, that was tough. That was really tough. And then, of course, we see the floating blood is also a plot point too, because not only is it done to show the computer effects of the film, but also to show that the blood is beamed along with the men. So that becomes a potential clue, which will then be discovered, I think, by Chekhov when he does the thing with the finger. Like, what is this? This, right? This thing, which is I think, a trace of the Klingon blood later on the Enterprise during the investigation. So this is leading to a lot of things. So I like this too, how the special effects are not just for the special effects' sake, but they're also meant to show a plot point, which I think is very, very clever indeed. This is a violent scene too, very, very violent. I remember it was really shocking. And here's another way in which I think this film is taking a unique, almost dark turn. It feels like a Star Trek episode in one hand, but it also feels like a new thing. And one of the ways it feels like a new thing is the way in which it's treating on-screen violence in this way. So here's that as well. Not to say that there wasn't any violence ever before. I mean, Star Trek 2 is a very violent film, that's for sure. But what I am saying is that this seems, even for Star Trek 2 standards, this seems pretty intense. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It was just a very shocking thing. Then going to cutting through a little bit later, right? We see Chang. We come in peace, and you blatantly defile that peace. And for that, I shall blow you out of the stars. We have fire. According to our banks, we have twice. According to Spock, signal them our surrender, Captain. We surrender. This idea here is that he knows that if this escalates, this is going to turn into a war. So he's got to surrender, and he's got to figure out what's going on, and that he and Bones go to the ship. Bones volunteers himself because he says, I've got to help these people, and so let me. So that shows the humanity of Dr. McCoy, which is seen all throughout the history of Star Trek. That's one of the reasons why he's such a great character. They go to beam aboard under suspicion, great suspicion of Kurla and others, of course, and Come With Me. They go to see the bloody carnage, and then go to the Chancellor, who is now being cradled by Azit Bor and also looked over by General Chang. And General Chang makes the accusation right there. Very, very lucidly, by the way. He all knows almost to the point what happened. 2 of your men came on board with gravity boots, and they shot everyone. Like, kind of already what's going on here. So it's almost as though maybe the story was already set prior. But anyway, let's get to that later. As it Boris creating, then Dr. McCoy tries to do this one last thing, this one last act of saving this person's life. He's like, can you say, I don't even know his anatomy, which is just, but he that doesn't stop him. He's just doing whatever he thinks instinctually he can do, just the final bit, and he does. This is an interesting thing too, because I should point this out. I'm not sure if anyone else knows. If you have any information about this, please let me know. The Blu-ray and say whatever, all the subsequent. This film was released in theaters, right, in 1991, and I saw it in the theater, and it was the version that you saw in the theater. So there's no Colonel West, there's nothing like that in the theater. The then later, when you saw the theatrical cut on Blu-ray, for example, it was marketed as being the theatrical cut. But I could swear that when I saw this film in the theater, specifically when I saw this scene in the theater with Bones looking at the mortally wounded Chancellor Gorkon, there is a moment where Bones is on top of Gorkon's body, and he's trying to essentially resuscitate him and massage his heart, or assuming that's his heart, I'm not sure. I don't know Klingon anatomy myself. And there's a moment where Bones is like trying to resuscitate him, and it's Bones is straddling the body of Chancellor Gorkon. He's trying to do that. I could swear that clip was in the version that I saw as a kid in the theater. But when I see the so-called theatrical version on Blu-ray, that is edited out. And when he's on top, it then suddenly cuts to Bones not straddling him, but actually kneeling next to him on the table. So I always thought, that is not how I remember that particular scene when I saw it as a kid. So I don't know. I could never find an answer to that. So that suggests to me the possibility, anyway, that maybe there was, even when you have the theatrical cut, for purposes of presenting the so-called theatrical cut in physical media form, home media form, maybe there's a little bit of fine-tuning done on that part as well. I'm not sure, but I could swear that scene was different. Just that, like, couple seconds or so, 1 second, 2 seconds or so. But oh well, so if anyone has any information about that, please let me know. Yeah. All right. And then what I love here too, the final moment when Bones is able to give one last gasp to Gorkon. What does Gorkon do? He doesn't. He goes to the nearest person. It's Kirk. Doesn't go to Azadbor, his daughter, but or to Chang, but to Kirk. He says, "Don't let it end this way, Kirk." And this is it. That's his final. That's a valedictory final moment, and then he dies, and then Kirk and Bones are arrested. What is it? Um, and then they are charged for murder, and then we get to that great trial scene, which we saw, which you spoke about a little bit earlier. So I won't repeat that conversation that we had earlier. But that's the trial scene, and then they are sent. They would have died. They would have been sentenced to death, and you can see that the judge is showing "quote unquote" leniency. And in the trial scene, you see the kind of look of frustration. You could interpret it as being frustration on Chang's face, because when the judge announces that they're not going to sentence them to death, Chang's like, oh, well, maybe it was Chang's plan to want to get them to die by execution, but instead they are sentenced to repente, uh, a hard labor. So this is, and that sets up the next part of the film. Bones and Kirk are going to go to Repente, while Spock and the crew on the Enterprise are trying to kind of figure out what's going on. Because according to Spock, and a a distant relative of his once said, would be fond of saying that if you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. So this is an allusion to, right? So I just think that, what is it? Maybe Spock is distant relative of what is it, Sherlock Holmes or something like that, or maybe just Vulcan who admired Sherlock Holmes. I think that's the idea. But in any event, we also know the connections between Nicholas Meyer and Sherlock Holmes. So therein lies the great A plot and B plot, which is very much similar to how a lot of the episodes of the series would work, right? Which is the A plot being on the planet and the B plot being maybe on the ship. And oftentimes the B plot with the ship, Spock would be behind, being captain of the ship or temporary captain of the ship. And oftentimes in the episodes, the TV series, that would show Spock being somewhat maybe incompetent. He is very intelligent and logical, but he is also somehow lacking in the leadership skills that Kirk has. So that was oftentimes the case in the division of the A plot, B plot, where Kirk and Spock would be separated. And then when Kirk would return, that would be the restoration of order, and thus things would be back to normal. But here we have the A plot B plot dynamic, which is on the one hand very similar to the series, but it is different because it's not dividing to show the incompetency of one without the other. But rather, Kirk is doing the best he can under these very trying circumstances. He's doing pretty well, I think. Well, of course, with a little bit of a good luck charm, or some kind of Velcro thing from Spock, by the way, which is a tracker, right? On the one hand, and then Spock showing that he can command very well in order to try to conduct this investigation, this Sherlock Holmes investigation, this murder mystery on board the Enterprise, to find the gravity boots, etc. Great stuff. And then we're off. Or as was quoted earlier in the chat, and is going to be said in the film later, the game's afoot. All right. But before we get to that, let us go to the chat. Okay. Yeah, neuroleptic. Thank you very much. Yes, Nicholas Meyer and the Sherlock Holmes connection. Yes. Let's see. Yeah, mountains out of molehills. You say straddling Gorkon. LOL. Yes, I think it did. It did. There were maybe some unintentional laughs in the theater when that scene came up. That's why I remember it the way I do. Now, I could be wrong in my memory, but if I'm assuming that the unintentional laughter was due to the fact that maybe it looked maybe unintentionally funny, that could be a reason why maybe it was decided to take it out. If indeed my guess is correct, and we totally need it, to have kind of unintentional laughter in that really intense moment, I think would have destroyed the drama. So maybe just to avoid anything like that, just even the something that might look somewhat unintentionally, maybe some sexual related humor, let's put it that way, just to remove it completely. That wasn't the point of the scene at all, right? So but anyway, um, all right, so um, let's see here. Yes, double first. Our manners weren't exactly Emily Post says. That's what Kirk says in the captain's log. Yes. Well done, W. Forge. Yes, I noticed that too. Oh, Cooper Glover says, "Oh, wow, Cygnus in the Black Hole. You're making reference to the Black Hole, the film, The Black Hole. I love that film, by the way. That is such a cool film. I've seen that film so many times. Um, yeah, that's talk about a dark film. I can't believe I saw the Black Hole when I. How old was I when I saw the Black Hole? I must have been like what 6 or 7 or something when I saw the Black Hole. Can you imagine watching the Black Hole? Do you remember that the scene that really frightened me? I never knew exactly what it was until later, and then when I understood older when I was older what it actually was, it even scared me even more. Which is a scene with Anthony Perkins and the binder and Maximilian's like, and he's got the thing like that scene. Oh my gosh, that's anyway. Um, anyway, sorry, we'll stop. All right. Okay. Um, let's see here. All right. Let's go to the next part of the discussion here, which is now we're off. The two strands, the A plot, B plot are off. So Ruapente and Kirk and Bones with this desolate situation, sub-zero temperatures. Person is thrown on the planet's surface and then dies almost immediately in this terrible, tragic way. And they go down into the cavern, and they're almost confronted by these various assortment of prisoners, labor camp, and the situation is quite intense indeed. And they're also caught inside a shield of some sort, which prevents transporting out. So this is also a key element here. And so they go in, and then after some cutting back and forth between this plot and the Enterprise plot, we also see that there's the fight. There's some kind of fight going on with some alien monster, and then the kick to the knees, right? And of course the great commentary from Martia or Iman, the Martia character. What is it? Not everyone keeps their genitals in the same place. I think I'm paraphrasing. So I don't want to imagine what romantic nights must be like for that particular species, but it must be very interesting indeed. It also reminds me too of someone mentioned Cronenberg. There's the idea of the placement of genitals in Cronenberg films is also a really interesting theme. So I think it would have fit really nicely in a David Cronenberg film. But anyway, here we have the introduction of Martia character, and we find out later that she is a cameloid, and so shapeshifter species. And so she decides to have, and she also seen smoking what we think is a cigar. So here we have another shot of smoking in a Star Trek story. We saw Talbot, the David Warner character, smoking, I think, a cigarette in part 5 in the earlier film, but now we have Martia here. And then so the idea later is, or this particular plot, which it's actually quite a good chunk of the film, by the way, is we see their attempts to escape with Martia, and she's going to try to help Bones and Kirk escape, and then they're going to go off outside of the barrier so they can beam out. So that's the plot, by the way. So that's going to carry through. I'm sorry, I just, in the interest of time, I'm just going to speed this along as best as I can. So I apologize if I'm skipping over some details here that you want to talk about. But also, there's a really key scene at night between Bones and Kirk. They're sleeping before their escape, and here is where Kirk is really revealing how he is struggling with his own prejudices And this is a key point too, because this is really important in terms of how his character arc will be defined by the end of the film. So here is the beginning of a type of turning point, which was probably already there to begin with, but this is really important key scene. But then they go to the outskirts, and then across the barren, frozen tundras, and then they get to the wonderful flashlight bonfire and stuff, and then something to punch, and then so the idea of is that Flair standard issue. It's just to set him up. And so that's the idea, is that Marty has essentially set them up in order to get a full pardon. Now, if I were Kirk, I wouldn't have punched Marty at that point. I would just waited a little bit more, just to carry on the ruse. That would have been much easier, because that would have probably avoided having to do the whole fight between Martia and Kirk to begin with. And Martia now is shapeshifts to the shape of Kirk. Also, by the way, too, this is interesting. In the prior examples of her shapeshifting, we'd never see her or heard her voice change, but here her voice changes to Kirk's voice. So we can assume maybe that she could do it before, but she didn't. Now she's doing it just to make it even more confusing. So it's Kirk versus Kirk. So this is very much like I don't know, like something out of Superman 3 or something. But it's an interesting. It does get a little bit. I think the bit that he says, "I can't believe I kissed you. Must have been your lifelong ambition." Okay, I get it. All right. Well, okay, whatever. They have a fight, which I think itself is very effective, and then they're caught. They roll over Bones, which is it's kind of funny, but Bones is still alive, thank goodness. And then the guards arrive. And then shoot him! Don't shoot him! Shoot him! Don't shoot me him! Thank goodness he got it right, huh? Could you imagine? Could you imagine if he shot the real Kirk? Could you imagine? Just imagine how the rest of the film, indeed, how the rest of the Star Trek would have played out. From there on in, you could have had a situation where it was not the real Kirk, but it was Martia masquerading as Kirk would be on the Enterprise. Could you imagine that scene? Could you imagine at the end, when everything is gone and the Excelsior, the Enterprise, or Excelsior goes off and the Enterprise is off, course heading captain, says Chekhov, and then Kirk says, second star to the right, and straight on till morning, and everyone's like smiling, na 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 na, and then at the end he goes to the elevator shaft. I'm going to my quarters. Call me if you need anything. He goes in, the elevator shaft closes, and he closes it on his face, and he transforms to Martia. Could you imagine? That would be like a Twilight Zone twist at the end. And so therefore we understand that the Enterprise is now being captained by Martia. That could have been so cool. And they're heading towards the star. Maybe they would have been like taking over command of the Enterprise, and they discover that Martia is an imposter, and they go to the star and they do like a star slingshot, whatever, time warp. They go back in time while they're trying to find Captain Kirk and stuff like that. And maybe since the real Captain Kirk was vaporized, they don't have his body. But here's the idea. They rolled over, right? He rolled over Bones. So maybe in the physical touching of Bones, Kirk was able to transmit his katra into the body of Bones during the fight. And so Bones now holds Kirk's katra. Kirk's body was then vaporized by the Klingon guards. So Martia has transformed, shapeshifted into Kirk. There's a battle aboard the Enterprise. They discover Martia's real identity. Then they also discover that the katra of Kirk is caught in Bones' body. There's a fight. The Enterprise goes into time warp because it goes too close to that star and goes back, I don't know, let's say to the 20th century again. They meet, I don't know, let's say they meet Jillian as a young girl or something, I don't know. And then they say, Jillian, one day you might meet someone at the Cetacean Institute. If that happens, just stop and give them a ride and let them know. Ask them if they like Italian or something like that. I don't know. And then they fight, and then Martia is then subdued. And then the idea is they will take Martia's body, and Martia has by now died, but the body remains. They will take Martia's body and then transfer Kirk's katra into Martia's body. So then once Kirk's katra is in Martia's body, it will be shape-shifting Kirk and then the new adventure. So that would have been really cool. And it could have been, could you imagine shape-shifting Kirk fighting Soren in the Nexus or something. Anyway, okay, so well. But thank goodness that the guard shot, right. It wasn't the real Kirk, so it could have been a completely different Star Trek, by the way. Anyway, what was I saying? So now they beam aboard the Enterprise. So then you want to go back? No, I don't want to go back. So that's that part of the scene. Then all the while we have the Enterprise plot, which is great, which is the murder mystery, the investigation, Sherlock Holmes trying to eliminate the impossible. And so they're trying to find the gravity boots and the suits. And so that leads to the greats. And then Valeris is heading the investigation. So she finds the gravity boots and she turns and she's like, oh, yes, I found it. If the shoe fits, wear it. But we see that the boots cannot fit the particular person whose locker this belongs to because of the shape of the feet. And so that we see the look on Valeris's face. And so she seems to register disappointment. Maybe her plan failed. That was the thing. And then we see too later the Klingon blood that Chekhov discovers, and then later we see, oh, it's so hot, according to Scotty, and he's also drinking, looking at schematics, and then he sees that the reason why it's hot is because the vents are blocked with the suits, and then he says, oh, and I found that, and then they open and they see that the two people. And these are the crew members who had expressed their disdain for the Klingons after they had boarded the earlier part of the film, and their smell, and they're making some really disparaging remarks about them. And so we understand that these are the two crew members who are probably the assassins, who actually with the gravity boots, but then they are now seen to be dead. But then the ruse is set up by Kirk and Spock to pretend that they're still alive, and then that this will bring the real killer to the sickbay. And so the real killer does come to the sickbay, and it is revealed to be, ta-da, Valeris. Okay, as I mentioned, big surprise, maybe not, but still, okay, I see what they're going at. Now, what's key, too, about this scene, the confrontation between Valeris and Spock, and Kirk as well. Valeris has the gun on Spock and says, shoot. You must shoot. And she says, I don't want to. And this is so important. Spock hits the gun out of her hand, and you see the anger on his face. Emotion is being registered on the face of this Vulcan. Granted, too, yes, half human, that's true, but he is a Vulcan. And emotion is being registered. This is a shocking moment, too, really shocking. And it's probably suggesting how betrayed Spock must be feeling at this moment, which is then understood too by the fact that he was the one who is personally involved in trying to establish peace with Gorkon, and it is Valeris, someone he was also personally involved with, that is directly involved planning the unraveling of that peace. Not to mention, of course, their close connections. So there's so much betrayal that I'm sure he's feeling, but the anger, that was a shocking moment to me. And this leads to the confrontation on the bridge. Valeris holds her own in this almost mock trial of sorts. And she mentions she should have been silent. I don't know why she's talking. She should have just been silent. But she hints that there is a conspiracy. Those who stand to lose to peace were involved. But she says, I do not remember their names. And so then this leads to what I think is probably the most controversial moment of Spock's character, which is the forcible mind meld of Valeris. Now, it might have had good intentions, and it might have had a good purpose behind it, but there is still a lot of very morally troubling aspects to this. There's a lot of morally troubling aspects to this. I'm surprised that there wasn't much done with this particular aspect. There could have been stuff done, for instance, in terms of, there's a lot of references to 20th century geopolitics. There could have been a reference made to, say, the Geneva Convention and the treatment of prisoners, but there wasn't. So, and surprisingly, there isn't any mention of this per se in, say, the commentary track from Nicholas Meyer and Company. So, but I think that this is a really controversial moment because it is, and it's been mentioned, I think, others, because this is a real obvious maybe violation of rights. No matter how nefarious one might think Valeris's intentions were in terms of her involvement in the conspiracy. So this is really really troubling stuff. And even now, I'm not sure how to process this fully, but it is troubling stuff. So, and this is an area too where it would have been really interesting if the film maybe dealt with this with a little bit more maybe robustness. Rather than it happens and then it goes off. But it is quite shocking. It's very shocking. And we actually see too the horror or the shock on, say, Uhura's face and then Scotty's face, although we're not quite sure where it leads. But I think we should emphasize it is really, really morally troubling moment. Now, with that said, the information that's revealed here is that the members of the conspiracy are revealed, who are Admiral Cartwright and then the Romulan ambassador and also General Chang. No mention here, I think, of the Klingon ambassador, which is, I think, interesting. So I'm not sure why at the end when they all beam down to Kittimer, Camp Kittimer, and there's a shot of Chekhov pointing his phaser at, I think it's the Klingon ambassador. Is the Klingon ambassador part of the conspiracy or not? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's revealed in the story, but in any event, that is that's the situation in terms of the reveal of the conspirators here, which is now it brings up much more, not much more, but it brings up a potentially equal troubling aspect, which is the way in which the conspiracy is being evolved, and we have members of the Federation or Federation, Romulan and Klingon conspiring to essentially enemies conspiring to maintain to continue to be enemies. So it's and there's a hint of that in terms of the Romulan ambassador's line, which I think was cut out because of the Colonel West angle, which is, or it's a part of the extended sequence, which he's talking to the president. Um, um, oh gosh. Oh man, why? Hold on, I just lost my train of thought. Hold on, just give me 1 second here. I was just thinking of something, that happens to me all the time. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. So when he's talking to the president and he says there will never be a better time. So this is hinting at the fact that he too is maybe aligned with the thinking of Admiral Cartwright when he's talking to the president. Kurtwood Smith too, by the way, right? So there's yet another connection between Star Trek and RoboCop too, if you remember from Part 3. Miguel Ferrer, right? The consul there of the USS Excelsior, and then Kurtwood Smith here too. So I could you imagine if the president says, can you fly, Romulan ambassador? And then like suddenly there's maybe later there's like a vat of acid in the president's office and it falls and the Romulan ambassador, and then someone drives through and then just at the windshield, it's all green. But anyway, yeah. Anyway, what was I saying? Someone then says on the TV, I'd buy that for $1, but then someone off screen, maybe Sarek says, but actually there is no money in the 23rd century. Tell that to McCoy when he makes that joke at the end, I give real money if he'd shut up. But anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, what was I saying? Yeah, so what was I saying? Oh yeah, so the conspiracy, right? So it's interesting to note that in the VHS extended, or in the theatrical cut Blu-ray, and also I think in the VHS extended version, there was never any editing done here. But I think in, say, the director's cut or extended version for this DVD, for example, you have like the edited in flashes when they say Admiral Cartwright, you suddenly get a flash of shot of Admiral Cartwright, General Chang, shot of General Romulan ambassador, uncles, the Romulan ambassador or something. I never really liked that. I liked it how it was originally intended. It was just their names being set out. But what was I saying? So yes, so this is the but she doesn't know where the peace conference is going to be held. So that's why they contact Sulu, and Sulu says, "Oh, your message is breaking up." Thank you. And then Sulu reveals that to his knowledge, the conference is going to be held at Camp Kittimer, and it's going to be held today. So thank you very much. So now they are going to rush to Kittimer to try to save the peace conference. Also, one other bit of information that I didn't mention because of time, I apologize, but throughout the investigation, they have Spock has come to the conclusion that there is a bird of prey that is cloaked that can fire when cloaked. And this probably accounts for the torpedo shots on the Cronus one. In other words, it wasn't the Enterprise that fired the torpedoes, but it was the bird of prey that was cloaked beneath the Enterprise, and it shot from that angle to suggest that the Enterprise fired, but indeed it wasn't. But that is the plot. So we have this is another key. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay, so let's see here. What was I saying? So yes, so this is all the plots are on rolling forward. Azet Bohr is now the Chancellor of the High Council. And so she is now going to be attending the peace conference at Kittimer. And so now everyone is racing towards Kittimer. While they're racing, there's one final moment of contemplation between Kirk and Spock. Spock is in his quarters. He prefers it dark. And he's just, he says, are we, so old that we have outlived our usefulness? Would that constitute a joke? And so he's really, really considering, well, I don't know what Spock is considering at this moment, but now this is a type of union between the two of them. And Spock also, among his many things that he's thinking about, he acknowledges that what he did could have cost him his life. Kirk, he says, that's okay. Kirk says this is okay. And this is the remedying of the relationship, which is, I think, a great bookend to that meeting council scene at the beginning, where there's a great distance between them. Here the distance is now shortened, and now they're back together as brothers. He says, something, everyone's human. And then Spock says, I find that remark insulting. I need you. And then they go, and they're racing towards Kittimer. So here we have the final act here, Kittimer. But before we get to Kittimer, let me go to the chat. Yes, Neil Blissy, thank you very much. The flashbacks were added for that DVD you have there. Thank you. By Nicholas Meyer. Yes, I understand. I don't really like it. Just something has that dun music note. I understand why it's there, because it helps to show the audience who these people were. But yes, mountains out of molehills. I'd buy that for a bar of I'd buy that for some Romulan ale. I don't know. I don't know what would be the RoboCop equivalent in Star Trek, but yeah. All right. So, shall we get to it? Shall we get to the? Shall we get to this final act here, which is really quite exciting stuff. So on the one hand, we have every ship seemingly racing towards Kittimer while the conference has already started, and the president is there, and he's opened the conference, and we see the CNC there, Admiral Cartwright's there, Azet Bohr's there, the Klingon ambassador who we saw in part 4, and a little bit of a scene earlier in part 6 is there. Brigadier Curler is there, also some Klingon with a mustache of some sort. He looks up a lot at something there, right? And it's got a big briefcase. I don't know. I gotta say, I mean, I love Star Trek. Don't get me wrong, but the security, you've got to do something about the security. How can you have people suddenly beam in to the conference in mid-conference? That doesn't make sense to me. Also, how can you have someone with a briefcase that obviously has a rifle? And I don't know, but anyway, so this is the peace conference, and then we have everyone racing towards it. That we understand the Enterprise is racing, and they understand too that the Klingon bird of prey could be there, and so the danger is there, but they have to go. Sulu, in the meantime, is racing towards Kittimer. In range? Not yet, sir. Come on. She'll fly apart then, right? And so that's the greatness of Sulu in a nutshell right there. But then, as the Enterprise arrives towards Kittimer, we get the voice. I can see you, Kirk. Chang, can you see me? Oh, now, be honest, Captain. Warrior to warrior. You do prefer it this way, don't you, as it was meant to be? No peace in our time. Once more unto the breach, dear friends. And then the Cliff Idleman music. Oh, talk ba, talk back, boom. And then, back off, back off. Then, what's she waiting for? Probably attempting to ascertain why, reversing, wondering with redetector. And another fire. Dun, dun, incoming, dun, 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 and more firing done on the Enterprise. Boom, 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 boom. And then the torpedo hit through the saucer section there. I mean, that comes a little bit later, though. And then all the quotes from Shakespeare, right? And even a little bit of not embellishments, but a little bit of maybe a shortening or abbreviations, right? Like Merchant of Venice, for instance, not quite the full quote, but tickle us do we not laugh. According to Chang, tickle us do we not laugh, prick us do we not bleed, wrong us shall we not revenge. And then our revels now are ended, Kirk. Cry havoc and let's slip the dogs of war. And so I love that bit too. Cry havoc and let's slip the dogs of war, because you can see when Chang is just doing that thing, turning around in the chair. In the background, there's one Klingon. He's like looking like, is he okay? You know, that's such a funny moment. But just looking at that back Klingon in the background there, and then I'm mixing up all the continuity and the chronology, so please forgive me. Then the Excelsior arrives just in time. All right, hold here. Shield up. All right, let's give him something else to shoot up. Icer. The game's afoot. And they target the Excelsior. Our rebels now are ended, Kirk. So this is, and then in the meantime, the crew stand together, and there's this whole thing about the gaseous anomalies related equipment, which the Enterprise now has, not the Excelsior, but that we've discussed that. But anyway, let's assume that they have it. And so they say that, well, the thing's got to have a tailpipe. And so the idea is, Doctor, will you assist me in performing surgery on the torpedo? Fascinating. So McCoy and Spock are going to go down to the torpedo room, try to customize a torpedo in order to make it track the plasma trail of the Klingon bird of prey that's cloaked, which is a really good idea. Thank goodness they got it right, because if the plasma trail was not that of the bird of prey, but that of the Enterprise or the Excelsior, then that torpedo might have locked onto that trail and destroyed the Excelsior or hit the Enterprise. But anyway, thank goodness it later we find it tracked the trail of the Klingon bird of prey. Anyway. So maybe Spock did something in order to avoid that. I think we can assume that maybe that was possible. Anyway, so now Spock and McCoy are going down to the torpedo bay. Remember, too, that in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Spock's body was put in a torpedo like a coffin. So could you imagine if Spock said, instead of performing surgery on a torpedo, he said to Bones, Dr. McCoy, I'm going to go inside this torpedo, and the Enterprise is going to fire the torpedo, and it's going to ram into the bird of prey, and I'm going to burst open, and I'm going to fight it. So could you imagine if that was the Spock's plan? Instead of performing surgery on a torpedo, the surgery was himself, and he put himself in the torpedo, and he flew, and he went on the bridge of the bird of prey, and like fought, maybe gave Chang the Vulcan neck pinch. I don't know, but any alternate reality. Then we know that didn't happen in the film. What did happen was bet you wish you stood in bed. They perform surgery. The key, please, doctor. Time is short. And the torpedo blasts through the saucer section, destroying the mess hall, the banquet place where the Klingons and the crew had their dinner earlier in the film. The hull has been compromised. I wonder how bad. Connect echo bars, and then at the same time we have the assassin on the ground there, getting ready for putting together assembling the rifle, while at the same time it's intercut with Bones and Spock assembling the customized torpedo. I am constant as the northern star. I'd give real money if he'd shut up. That got the biggest laugh in the theater when I saw it in the theater the first time. Although, as we mentioned earlier, there is no money in the 20th century. So maybe Spock's saying, what are you talking about? There is no money. Maybe he said that just under his breath. Who knows? But anyway, it's a funny line. It's a really funny line. And it's like commence for the minutes of the preparation. Where's that Dr. Peter? She's ready, Jim. Lock and load. Fire. And travels, and everyone knows. And then I love the look on Chang's face. He knows. It's up. That's why he says it, right? Dun, 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 dun. That's why he says it. To be or not to be. Boom, boom. Targeted explosion and fire. Dun, 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 dun. Fire. Dun, 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 boom. Boom. Explosion. We'll see that explosion perhaps in another film, Generations. But anyway, the this got a huge reaction in the theater when the fireball destroyed Chang's body, right? Or whatever that shot is. That got a huge like applause. I remember this, and it's another fist pumping moment, right? However, however, this moment is quite arguably a maybe almost in an interesting way. It could be said to be somewhat inconsistent with maybe the philosophy of Star Trek, although I do see both sides of the coin. So hear me out here, which is this is a very violent explosion climax. And to be perfectly honest, we haven't seen a lot of violence explosion climaxes in Star Trek films. We've had our share. I mean, we've had maybe notably Star Trek II, the explosion of the Reliant, and arguably too maybe Star Trek III, the fight on the disintegrating Genesis planet between Krug and Kirk. So we've had those kind of violent, explosive, climactic moments, but um, they've never even the explosion of the Reliant, I would say, has an air of sadness about it, and even with the destruction of Krug, we still had that was very quick, and so it had a sense of there was a type of maybe mixed signals going on. Let me put it that way. I would argue that Star Trek Six's explosion has this fist pumping action to it, which almost is maybe inconsistent, at least with maybe what could be said to be the Roddenberry view of Star Trek. Maybe I could imagine the Roddenberry view of Star Trek saying, we don't want to destroy this ship. We want to disable it and keep as many survivors as possible where possible. So this is, I think, that was the thing. Now I can understand the other side of the coin, because one could say that they needed to destroy the bird of prey in order to defend themselves, because the two ships, especially the Enterprise, were being just hammered, absolutely hammered with the onslaught of torpedoes. So I can understand both sides. So this is another part where I would suggest this is maybe another way in which this film, Star Trek 60 Undiscovered Country, goes in a slightly darker turn, for lack of a better phrase. It's still a very exciting moment, and Chang is very dastardly, we know. And so maybe he's deserving of this in cinematic language, let's put it that way. But in terms of the diplomacy that is going on, there is a ring there's a ring to the scene that might seem somewhat inconsistent. However, this is not dwelled upon too much, because then we go straight to the surface of Kittimer. And from Kittimer, they beam down again. How do they beam down in the middle of the coast? I have no idea. What are the securities? I have no idea. Anyway, incidentally, too, there's a shot outside of the camp, outdoors in Kittimer, and you understand that the Klingons and the Federation, they're at war, but they've got to come together peace. It's a tense situation. There are a lot of heated arguments. As it Bore's angry because her father recently got assassinated. So tension is in the air. But outside, you notice there are those two people standing on the deck there, the ledge there. There's a Klingon and there's a Federation officer looking guy. And they're just standing there just talking. Oh, look at that. And I can imagine they're probably having a really nice conversation, the two of them. A very peaceful, friendly conversation. Peace is actually happening at Kittimer, not inside the halls of Camp Kittimer, but actually outside between the two of them. You talk about peace. They're probably doing a lot more for peace between the Klingons and the Federation than anyone at that particular moment. But anyway, I digress. Going back to the shots there, they go down out of the way. They're trying to save the president because they know he's probably going to get assassinated. Mr. President says, Mr. President says, Mr. President, and he dies over. I remember this moment too, just at the moment where the shot is fired on the president on the podium there. Kirk flies. My mom, when she was sitting next to me in the theater, she grabbed my arm. She thought that Kirk was going to die at this moment. She grabbed my, and then when he says, Kirk, Enterprise, on the ground there, the tension was released. That was a really intense moment. Yeah, that was really great. And then the chaos ensues. As I say, Chekhov for some reason, I'm not sure, please correct me if I'm wrong, points his gun, I think, at the Klingon ambassador. Is he involved? I'm not sure. There's also, the Bones with the thing on the Romulan ambassador, the Romulan ambassador there, and then Cartwright, arrest those men, arrest yourself, and then we've got the Valeris. They brought Valeris there first. I don't know why they didn't keep her on the Enterprise, just keep her on, but okay, they brought Valeris there, and then Cartwright tries to go away, but then Sulu and the people, like, turn and go, oh, Cartwright, not quite. And then what I love too, my favorite bit, you notice how Scotty goes up to the top there, and they know exactly where the assassin is, which is great foresight on the part of Kirk and the crew. But Scotty, when he goes in, he doesn't just go in. He that door, he just kicks the door, just fall. That's like the door just falls. Scotty, gosh, Scotty and doors, my goodness. And then boom, the guy falls out of that pillar thing and falls. And then of course we know from the extended edition that there's a lot more to this particular assassin than meets the eye, from terms of a particular character that we meet, not in the theatrical cut, but in the extended cut. A character named Colonel West. Gosh, talk about David Warner syndrome, and between part 5 and part 6, talk about this extended cut Star Trek 6: The Undiscovered Country and Deep Space Nine. Oh no, my gosh, what's going on? My mind is exploding, but I am running out of power here. Oops, sorry about this. I don't want to. There we go. I think. Yep, good. Sorry, I'm good. I'm still good. All right. So, yep. So, what was I saying? Yes. So this is, and then the idea here's what's happened. What is the meaning of this? It's about the future. And then here Kirk reaches his character arc's conclusion. He says, you know, there are people who might be frightened of change. And then this moment of peace, true peace, occurs between Azit-Bor and Kirk, who represent the two sides of the conflict between the Klingons and the Federation. And Azit-Bor, to her credit, says, "You have restored my father's faith." And then Kirk, to his credit, says, "And you've restored my son's." And this is bringing the character arc, the plot of David, Kirk's son David, from part 3, part 2 and part 3, full circle in this really brilliant way. And everyone starts clapping. You know, even some of the aliens going like that. And then in the great words of Red Letter Media and Mr. Plinkett Reviews, I can't do Mr. Plinkett for the life of me, but I'll try. And then the crew of the Enterprise stood around for a picture that no one took. You know, whatever their review of Star Trek 6 was at the time. So, and then I went and I had a pizza roll, or something like that. So anyway, so what was that? Star Trek Generations was the worst thing since most disappointing thing since my son, or something. Red Letter Media. And then we have the final send-off, right, between one last word of exchange between Sulu and Kirk and the crew, Excelsior and Enterprise. And it says, "Nice to see you in action one more time, Captain Kirk. Take care." Excelsior goes off, and that's a fine ship, not as fine as her captain, I think. "So this is goodbye," says Chekhov. And then it's about time we go off ourselves. And then here we have Uhura says, not Uhuru, but Uhura. She says, "Now we get." Oh, I'm sorry. The great line too. "Once again, we've saved civilization as we know it." And the good thing too, they're not going to prosecute. You know. And so that's a great callback, I think, to part 4, which is also, I think, referred to by the CNC in the extended sequence when he's talking one-on-one with the president. You know, they have saved this world, and they're going to save it again by going on trial. But anyway, so then there's the news about how Starfleet is asking them, after everything they've done, they're asking them to return to space dock to be decommissioned. Oh gosh. Everyone's like, and this moment got to me, that look on Kirk's face and the music. So sad. So sad. I just even time I look at it, just makes my heart break. But then Spock, ever so Spock, he says, you know, "If I were human, I believe my response would be, go to hell." If I were human. Everyone understands. And then the great music comes in, the Star Trek theme, dun, dun, dun. Course heading captain. What does he say? It's been quoted many times, including in this chat. Say it with me, my friends. Second star to the right. Straight till morning. It's great. It's a great way to end. And then the captain's log, the final captain's log of Kirk for the Enterprise under his command. And then they will leave behind the Enterprise for a new crew. Boldly go where no one has gone before. And then finally we get the the signatures. I love DeForest Kelly's signature, by the way. It has the kind of the I don't know, like Walt Disney type of look to it. It's really cool. And Leonard Nimoy, and then William Shatner, dun dun dun, 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 dun. That's it. That's the end. Yes, that's great. Great stuff. All right. So, yeah, it's great. Yeah, that was so cool. That was such a great send off. As I say, this is a really it has so many things going on, but this is a very very fascinating film in that way. It's a mixture of many things. There are things that are very much consistent with the old series and the prior films. There are things that are quite new and revolutionary and indeed quite controversial, as I would contest. But that doesn't make it anyway a bad film. It is one of the best. A really great thing, and in many ways too, it sits so well too in terms of the continuity between this crew and the Next Generation crew. And also other aspects of Star Trek that we might see in future iterations, in future series as well. But and we will see some of these crew members again. Don't get me wrong. Maybe they won't be together in the same bridge, all of them, but we will see them again in some form or another. So in that way, I think I will. It's now 9:30, and I have to go soon because of certain. I have to. There's an errand I have to run with my daughter, so I will stay for another a few minutes, and then I have to go. But now I'll go to the chat. Oh, as I'm looking at the chat, yeah, I just want to say that I'm the reason why I'm probably at the moment going to stop here and not go to the Next Generation films per se is because actually my view of the Next Generation films is that actually there is a lot of stuff that there's a lot of connections with the series. And in fact, I think there are more connections between the Next Generation series and the Next Generation films than there are between, say, the original series TV show and the original series films. That's my contention. So based upon that general principle, it's a little bit difficult for me to do the Next Generation films discussion unless I do a discussion of Next Generation, the TV series. And in that spirit, just between you and me, I'm actually the as much as I think there are some really good points to the Next Generation films, I'm actually maybe if I had to say what do I like better, like do I like do I like Generations or do I like All Good Things? I'm going to say the latter. So right, this means that my own personal preference is I would prefer if I were to do Next Generation live streams, I would actually like to do some of those two-parters. You know what I mean? So that's my general approach to that, which is why if I were to do Next Generation, I'd like personally to try to tackle a little bit more about the series first, and then approach the Next Generation films. So that's why I'll probably stop it here, and then go forward if I can. With the future Star Trek discussions. I'm not sure if I can do it immediately, but that's what I'm thinking. So that's why I'd like to stop it here for the time being. Yeah. Oh, and Neo Blissy, thank you. I can come on with you and do a joint live stream with you. Well, that's a really great idea, Neo Blissy. Let's reach out to me later. I'd love to. You can always reach out to me offline if we can figure out something. Definitely. Yes, W Forge, you will boldly go where no one has gone before. Yes, Cooper Clever says, Daisuke, what's next? I'll make an announcement soon. It'll probably be the Jaws films, or no, it is going to be the Jaws films, Jaws, Jaws 2, Jaws 3, and then Jaws: The Revenge. But it's not going to be next week. It just I might need a little bit of time off, maybe a weekend or something, and then I'll talk about it. Also, Kelvin films. Yeah, I'm the new start. Probably yeah. How should I put it? I'm kind of yeah yeah. If you like those, if you like, that's great. But yeah, uh, yeah, yeah. Yeah. What am I drinking? I'm drinking coffee, iced coffee. So yes, thank you very much. Yeah, so it'll be Jaws. Um, yes, W4 says who can't wait for Jaws the Revenge? I can't. I love Jaws the Revenge. I saw that in the theater too. So um, that's great. Yes, Jaws is greater than Kelvin films. So yeah, yeah, yeah. It was just oh gosh. Um, Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, let me just I'd like to end on this note, which is Star Trek 6. I love Star Trek 6 to bits. So, yeah, maybe one of these days we'll continue the Star Trek discussions if it's okay with you. Again, if you think, oh, that's your Star Trek discussions were trash, let's end it here. That's fine too. I don't mind. So, but the plan is we'll do Jaws, and then after that, maybe there's going to be a little bit of break, and we'll go to Jaws, and then after that, will be a little bit of break, and then it'll be the Superman films, at least the Christopher Reeve Superman films. That's Superman the movie, Superman 2, Superman 3, and then Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, and also discussion maybe of the difference, the different Richard Donner version, etc. But we'll do something like that. That's the plan. All right. I had so much fun, by the way. I really had so much fun with this. I hope it was. Oh, Don Kelly, thank you. Daisuke, please take care of your heart by not pounding on it. You only get one. Speaking as someone who's lived through a heart attack, thank you so much for your kind words. Yes, and I will do my best to take a look after my health. You're so kind. Thank you. Oh, Bartholomew, thank you so much. You say thank you, Daisuke. Fun as always. No, the pleasure was all mine. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, Cooper Glover says thank you very much. Yes, for your understanding. Yes, yes. Um, so I will, as I say, make the announcement. Roger says, "How about the Godfather trilogy?" You know, the Godfather trilogy is it's um let me say it might come up later. It might come up later, not in the live stream. It might come up later. 31 days. I shouldn't say anymore. I'll leave the surprises. I don't know if it's a surprise, but anyway, I'll leave that for something very soon. All right. Yes, Don Kelly, thank you so much for the series. See you at Jaws. Yes, thank you very much, my dear friend. Thank you. Um, and Superman 4. That's another one I saw in the theater. Yeah, Superman 4: The Quest for Peace. Yeah, so I that'll come maybe a little bit later in the year, but we will do that. We can always vote on a film series for discussions using the poll. Yeah, thank you, Zyrother, for that. I think what we'll do is maybe for after the next one we can do that. But let's say that unofficially Jaws is next. So Jaws is going to be next. Maybe after that we can see what's going on for series. Although I have to also figure out what I can do in terms of my own limitations, what it is I can speak about in terms of live streams, because um, it takes I'm not as young as I used to be, so I need to have a certain bit of energy, and so it has to be a specific series. So I can't do it's hard to do like any series. It has to be a particular set of films that really, for whatever reason, means a lot to me. And usually that means something that I've seen a number of times since I was a kid. So that's probably the situation. Also, I have to think about the length of films too. It's a bit of a, yeah, as I say, I'm not getting any younger, so but I'll keep trying. I'll keep trying. So I think Jaws is good because it's something that I've known since I was a kid. It's a good number. It's four films. So and then we'll see what happens from there. For instance, I've thought about like Zatoichi, but it's just that's like I don't know if I'd be able to do that for how many weeks, so it's a bit tough. But anyway, as I say again, to quote Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, there are always possibilities, right? Or I'd like to think that there always are possibilities. Anyway, so yes. All right, so I think in that, Roger says The Karate Kid would be fun. I'm a big fan of Karate Kid Part 3, by the way, which I also saw in the theater. I saw all those films in the theater. I know Karate Kid gets a bad rap, but I love The Karate Kid 3. I really do. I think I think that ends, I don't want to say too much, but I think it doesn't get enough credit. I think Karate Kid Part 3. Um, yeah. Um, yeah. I think oh gosh, the Karate Kid Part 3 could be my, yeah. Anyway. All right. Okay. Let's see. All right. So I think I've got to go now. So thank you very much, my dear friends, for always taking the time to stop by. I really appreciate it. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great movies. So thank you so much, my dear friends. And talk to you again very soon. And cheers. Thank you.